The morning sun illuminated the forest clearing, its light falling upon a rare sight. A cluster of silver slimes had appeared, their glimmering bodies shifting with liquid grace. These monsters were almost never seen, yet now they gathered openly in the wide expanse of grass. Two young men observed the scene from behind the cover of thick trees. One of them urged his companion to remain patient and let the slimes pass, believing that confronting them would only bring danger. His warning, however, went unheeded. The other young man rushed boldly into the clearing, paying no mind to the risks. The one left behind tried to call him back, shouting desperately, but his voice went unheard. The reckless figure was already closing in on the cluster of monsters. With swift movement, his sword struck true, splitting a slime's core cleanly in half. A critical strike had been delivered, and with it came sudden victory. Momentum carried him forward as he swung his weapon in wide arcs, striking left and right, carving through the silver creatures without pause. Their bodies collapsed and dissolved one after another until, in only a matter of seconds, not a single slime remained. The glow of triumph lit the stranger's eyes, an eerie green fire that reflected both exhaustion and exhilaration. The system's message resounded clearly. Player Takahashi Yukito had received several S-rank items. Silver slime armor appeared in his inventory, followed by matching gloves and boots. The weight of fortune seemed too heavy to be real. Watching from a distance, the young man in the green hoodie whispered in disbelief that Yukito had landed such extraordinary loot. Those nearby shared the same astonishment, realizing that the drops from the silver slimes were incredibly rare. Yukito himself could hardly comprehend what had happened. He gazed at the items in silence, his thoughts racing. In his heart, it felt like compensation for all the suffering and failure he had endured in another life. He remembered that in his previous existence he had been nothing more than a bronze-ranked adventurer, trapped within the lower floors of the Tokyo dungeon. That past fate had left him broken and unrecognized. Yet here he was, his fortune completely reversed, as if the universe had finally decided to grant him a reward. The group of onlookers turned their attention toward another device. One of the men activated his smartphone, its screen displaying a grim update. The monsters had begun to spill across the area outside the dungeon as well, making the surface dangerous for civilians. Some among them argued that it was safer to venture deeper into the dungeon, away from the growing chaos above. Others disagreed, fearing that the creatures from the surface would soon descend to their level regardless. In the midst of this heated discussion, Yukito noticed an elderly man stepping forward. He addressed him with concern, urging him to flee while the chance remained. This was no time to linger and hunt slimes. With urgency in his eyes, Yukito placed a hand upon the man's shoulder, hoping to convince him to retreat. The old man, however, brushed it away and walked stubbornly into the clearing. His resolve was absolute, and he ignored all attempts to stop him. The others whispered among themselves, dismissing him as senile. The situation quickly escalated when another impatient youth shoved the old man aside. His hood slipped from his head as he stumbled to the ground. Time seemed to slow for a moment. The years that had passed in this world flashed across everyone's minds. Ever since the adventurers had appeared, the system of growth had reshaped human destiny. Each individual gained characteristics through combat, and their level increased only by defeating monsters. The old man who had fallen carried the marks of a lifetime shaped by that system. Slowly, he rose to his feet, ignoring the pain in his body. He activated his scoreboard, revealing the truth of his strength. It displayed the name Takahashi Yukito and announced his current level, 98. His attributes appeared clearly. Strength, speed, and stamina had reached 5. Agility stood at 4, magic power at 3, and resistance at 2. The gathered adventurers gasped. This man, dismissed as frail, had climbed to the edge of the highest level through persistence and countless battles. No other could boast such progress. Despite his age, Yukito had spent the day battling wave after wave of slimes. His determination was evident in every swing of his weapon, though his blade eventually shattered under the strain. Even so, he pressed forward, knowing that the maximum level was 99. The dream he had chased his entire life stood within reach. The thought of closing that final gap filled him with energy. He rushed toward another silver slime, eyes burning with hope. The monster before him was massive, nearly transparent, with a glowing core suspended within its body. With no weapon left, Yukito resorted to his bare strength. He clawed and tore at the creature, even biting through its gelatinous form, until its core was destroyed. At that instant, the familiar message appeared before his eyes. Takahashi Yukito had reached the maximum level. His achievement had finally been recognized. Joy swelled within him, though it was swiftly tempered by the reality of his reward. His attribute panel updated, and his strength increased by only a single unit. The system mocked him with meager progress. After years of dedication, his efforts seemed reduced to nothing more than a cruel joke. Overcome with despair, Yukito collapsed to the ground. His body trembled, and his spirit faltered. The dream that had driven him appeared shattered. Shadows gathered at the edges of the clearing. Monsters emerged, drawn by the sounds of battle. Yukito lay powerless, consumed by regret. He thought of the people he had failed to protect, of his mother whose safety he had never secured. His entire life flashed before him as tears welled in his eyes. The monsters closed in, their claws ready to end him. Death seemed certain. Yet in that final moment, the system intervened. An error had been detected within Yukito's characterization. A hidden function activated, applying life restoration and rollback. His heart beat once more. New parameters unfolded before him, revealing a hidden compensation. A crude but overwhelming bonus appeared in his status window. He had been granted 9,999 luck characteristic points. Yukito slowly opened his eyes, though his vision remained blurred. Voices reached his ears, faint at first, then clearer. Someone was greeting him warmly. As his sight adjusted, he saw a young girl with a bright smile standing before him. She announced that Takahashi Yukito had officially become an adventurer. For a moment he could not move, stunned by what he had just heard. Confusion filled his heart as he questioned whether this was truly happening. The girl tilted her head with concern and asked if something was wrong. Yukito steadied himself, suppressing his disbelief, and managed to thank her for the pendant she had handed him earlier. Later, when he was alone again, the unease returned. He stared at his smartphone screen, sweat forming on his forehead. His mind replayed fragments of memory. He remembered that this was the exact day he had registered with the Adventurers Guild. Doubt swirled through him. None of this made sense. He recalled the moments before his death in his previous life. At that time, he had glimpsed something unusual about bonus characteristics. With trembling hands, he opened the familiar system window. The display was identical to what he remembered, yet one new detail stood out. A fresh column had appeared, one he had never seen before. His eyes widened in astonishment as he read the word luck. This parameter had never existed for him in his past life. It had to be a hidden characteristic, one inaccessible until now. The realization struck hard, leaving him questioning fate itself. Why had this ability revealed itself only to him, a man who had endured 70 years of failure? He found it difficult to believe, yet the evidence stood before him. Memories of his aged body flashed through his thoughts. Only recently he had been nearing the end of his life, weary and alone. Yet now he stood reborn, blessed with an opportunity to test this new attribute. It was the perfect chance to hunt monsters and confirm whether luck truly existed as a measurable power. Within moments, Yukito entered the Tokyo dungeon known as Imperishable Footprints, starting from the first floor. The familiar stone corridors and wild patches of grass spread around him. His eyes locked onto a target almost immediately. A slime lingered in the undergrowth as though waiting for him. As he moved to engage, a flicker of motion at the edge of his vision drew his attention. His breath caught in disbelief. It was a silver slime, one of the rarest monsters in existence. In his entire previous life, he had encountered such a creature only once, and that single encounter had ended in failure when the slime fled instantly. These slimes granted immense experience points but were notorious for their ability to vanish before being struck. Yukito steadied his breath and readied his sword. He thought that with a single decisive step he could bring it down. However, just as he closed the distance, a sudden flash split the grass. An arrow embedded itself into the ground at his feet. Someone in the distance called out an apology, but Yukito clenched his teeth in frustration. Such noise should have frightened the rare monster away. Yet, astonishingly, the silver slime remained in place. Instead of fleeing, it began to vibrate aggressively and then lunged straight at him. The attack came swiftly, but Yukito was prepared. He thrust his sword forward, piercing through the gelatinous body. His weapon struck the core directly, shattering it into fragments. A surge of energy pulsed through him as his level rose instantly. At the same time, his blade cracked apart, breaking under the force of the blow. Silver slimes were stronger than their appearance suggested, and even a successful strike demanded a heavy price. As he looked around for a replacement, a glimmer caught his eye in the grass. He approached cautiously and gasped when he saw what it was. An S-rank item lay before him, a massive sword crafted from the remains of a silver slime. He picked it up, marveling at its shine. The blade possessed remarkable attack power, though its unusual nature gave it a 30% chance to miss due to the slime's inherent slipperiness. Despite this drawback, Yukito felt deeply satisfied. This was an extraordinary start to his new journey. Moments later, his astonishment grew even further. In the neighboring clearing, 4 silver slimes sat clustered together. Such an occurrence defied all logic. The sheer improbability of it left him wondering if he had fallen into a dream. Before he could react, the creatures launched themselves at him simultaneously, their movements filled with hostility. There was no choice but to fight. With his newly acquired weapon, Yukito met the charge head-on. he quickly realized that destroying all of them at once would be impossible. Instead, he focused his strikes, delivering blow after blow. Critical hits landed repeatedly, his new attribute tilting fortune in his favor. Within minutes, the monsters collapsed one after another. The system rewarded him with another treasure, a magnificent set of armor that gleamed in the sunlight. Breathing heavily, Yukito looked at the battlefield around him. The evidence was undeniable. His luck was not an illusion. For the next hour, his hunt continued. He encountered 10 more silver slimes, each one yielding rare loot upon defeat. Piece by piece, his equipment and power grew. It was a transformation unlike anything he had ever imagined. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with him. He collapsed onto the soft grass, staring at the blue sky above. Relief and joy swelled within him. His thoughts turned to his family. With this newfound power, he could change their lives. He imagined helping his sick mother recover and providing comfort to his younger sister, Nozomi. He raised his hand toward the heavens, vowing that this time he would protect them and give them the happiness they deserved. Suddenly he froze. A realization struck him like lightning. He once again had a home to return to. 70 years of isolation and regret had ended. Now, fate had granted him the chance to rewrite everything. His body trembled as he stood, heart pounding with anticipation. He made his way back to his apartment. The number on the door read 203, with the name Takahashi engraved on the plate. His hands shook as he reached for the knob. He forced himself to take a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic rhythm of his chest. Just as he prepared to open it, the door swung outward. Standing before him was Nozomi. Her eyes widened in delight at the sight of her brother. Yukito's emotions overwhelmed him. He rushed forward and wrapped her in a tight embrace. Confused yet laughing, Nozomi asked why he was acting so strangely, even wondering if this was part of some hidden prank. She asked him to let go, but he only held her tighter. At that moment, Yukito swore that he would never again allow harm to touch his family. His treasure had been returned to him, and he would guard it with everything he possessed. Yukito told Nozomi everything that had happened since the day he awakened in this new chance at life. His sister listened carefully, her eyes wide with amazement. The possibility of saving their mother seemed almost too good to be true. She asked if it was really possible, and Yukito replied with confidence that it would only take effort and determination. The very next morning, he wasted no time. Yukito gathered the rare items he had obtained from the dungeon and traded them at the market. The sheer value of the loot astonished even him, yet he remained composed, for he knew where every coin needed to go. With the money he gained, he made his way to a high-class auction house. Inside the grand hall, he raised his hand and bid 10 million for one of the lots. Tension filled the air, but in the end he succeeded. The prize was the highest quality healing potion available, a treasure beyond ordinary means. Holding the elixir in his hands, Yukito felt as though his heart might burst with relief. The next destination was already decided. He and Nozomi walked together to the hospital where their mother was receiving treatment. When they reached the room, they knocked and entered after receiving permission. Their mother was lying on the bed, pale yet smiling warmly as her children stepped inside. She asked how they were doing, though Yukito quickly turned the question back toward her. Nozomi opened a small box she had brought, revealing treats to cheer their mother's mood. The woman scolded them lightly, telling them not to spend their money on her when they should be eating well themselves. Yukito assured her that financial worries no longer burdened them. Nozomi added excitedly that they had brought another, much greater gift. Their mother looked puzzled and asked what it was. Yukito stepped forward, holding the bottle carefully in both hands. He explained that it might sound strange, yet she needed to drink this medicine. Nozomi supported his words, telling their mother that her brother had earned money in the dungeon and used it to purchase the elixir. Their mother's expression shifted to shock. She knew Yukito had only just become an adventurer, and yet he had somehow obtained enough wealth for such a rare potion. He answered with a faint smile that it had been luck, for the dungeon was little more than a great lottery. He urged her once more to drink. After a moment of hesitation, their mother accepted the bottle, uncorked it carefully, and raised it to her lips. She swallowed the contents without protest. Almost instantly, her body began to glow with a soft light. Yukito and Nozomi watched in silence, hearts pounding with anticipation. The glow faded slowly, and their mother took a deep breath, relief spreading across her features. She said it felt as though a heavy burden had been lifted from her chest. Yukito smiled with joy, and Nozomi clapped her hands in delight, praising her brother's efforts. Their mother, however, wrinkled her nose and muttered that the potion tasted awful. Yukito laughed softly and handed her one of the desserts Nozomi had brought to remove the unpleasant aftertaste. When the doctors next examined her, they were surprised to find her symptoms reduced and the illness no longer progressing. With a short period of rehabilitation, she was cleared to return home. For the first time in years, the three of them sat together at their own dinner table. Their mother washed the dishes afterward and spoke fondly about how nothing was as comforting as the walls of one's own home. Nozomi rejoiced at seeing her mother healthy again, but Yukito's expression remained thoughtful. She noticed and asked what troubled him. He explained that the potion was only a temporary measure, capable of halting the disease but not curing it completely. Her face fell with disappointment, and she asked what they should do next. Yukito revealed that the only hope lay in finding a true magic elixir, an item beyond any price. Nozomi recalled hearing of it from news broadcasts, an item once discovered by the world's strongest adventurer on the 50th floor of a dungeon. She reminded her brother that such a treasure could not be purchased, only found. Yukito nodded, confirming her words. That was exactly what he aimed for. He explained further that unique items were bound to the adventurer who discovered them, unable to be traded or bought. They were rewards for overcoming nearly impossible challenges. Nozomi asked if that meant they would have to find it themselves. Her voice carried a trace of fear as she wondered whether Yukito could truly descend to such depths. He admitted that in theory he could not, for he would certainly die on the way. Her hope faltered until he quickly added that he meant it only in theory. Unlike others, he still carried the knowledge of his previous life. He remembered that there was one rare exception. On the 20th floor, an ancient golem boss sometimes appeared, and defeating it had a chance of producing the very elixir they needed. The chance was slim, but it was not zero. In his past life, Yukito had heard of this happening only once. That single story had spread among adventurers like legend. Now, however, he felt certain that his unusual fortune would lead him to success. With his current circumstances, he believed it was possible. Nozomi studied his expression and teased him about looking suspicious. He asked if he truly seemed that way, and she winked, telling him she believed he could do anything. Her words filled him with encouragement. It was a blessing to have a family who placed their trust in him. Yet he knew that before venturing into the dungeon again, preparation was essential. Nozomi, surprised, asked what he meant by preparation. Yukito replied that there was always a way, everywhere and at all times, as long as one sought it with determination. Yukito walked over to the dresser where a framed photograph of their family stood. He lingered on it for a moment, his expression firm with resolve, then turned his attention to preparing for the next journey into the dungeon. The first step was gathering his equipment. Among the items he relied upon most was the large silver slime sword, a weapon that increased attack power significantly. However, it carried its own risks. Due to the unpredictable nature of silver slime, the weapon had a 30% chance of missing its target. Alongside this, Yukito had a silver slime tear, which provided him with a 33% chance of reducing incoming damage. These tools would be essential for what lay ahead. As Yukito packed his gear, Nozomi stood nearby, quietly watching him. After a brief silence, she asked if he was preparing to leave already. Yukito confirmed her suspicion without hesitation. She looked at him worriedly, noting that most warriors wore heavy armor when venturing into dungeons. He admitted that she was correct but explained that he was not strong enough to carry the weight of such equipment. The system's window of characteristics clearly revealed his limitations. Yukito understood that his strength was not sufficient to bear heavy armor or a full protective outfit. He could only depend on his luck and the equipment he could manage to carry, with his sword being the most reliable piece. He considered the variety of skills he had gained due to his level of elevation. One in particular stood out to him, the mighty layered lunge, a combat skill with a 30% chance of delivering 3 critical hits in quick succession. That ability could mean the difference between life and death. Nozomi then reminded him about the 5th floor of the dungeon, mentioning Alice's crown, a place where miracle fruit could be obtained from local monsters. Nozomi urged him once again to take care of himself, her concern evident. She had even prepared him a package of food for the road. Although he would be able to gather fruits within the dungeon, she wanted him to have something comforting from home. Yukito accepted the gift sincerely, grateful for her support, and the item immediately registered in his system window. With his preparations complete, he opened the door and stepped out of his home, setting forth once more on his adventure. The forest grew darker as he traveled deeper, lit only by the eerie glow of purple mushrooms clinging to tree trunks. Insects buzzed and scattered, becoming prey for carnivorous plants that thrived in the unnatural environment. Eventually, Yukito reached the entrance to the 5th floor, known as Alice's Wreath. The entire space was dominated by plant-type monsters, creating an environment where one could easily lose their way. Despite its treacherous atmosphere, the 5th floor had long been considered a low-level zone, regularly cleared by adventurers. Yukito trusted that with his map, he would not encounter any difficulties. Moving steadily through the forest, he kept his focus sharp and soon spotted what he was looking for. In the distance lay a den of tree ants, humanoid creatures that resembled trees. These monsters specialized in mimicry, disguising themselves perfectly to ambush the careless. Yukito studied them closely, noting their flawless resemblance to actual trees. However, certain details betrayed their ruse. The leaves lacked veins, and the roots extended unnaturally, bending like legs. These small tells revealed the truth of their existence. Suddenly, a pair of glowing red eyes blinked from within the trunk of one of the disguised monsters. Without hesitation, Yukito struck, and his critical hit landed true, splitting the Trent in half. He realized that once their presence was anticipated, defeating them was no longer a daunting task. From the remains of the Trent, a reward appeared. A magical fruit glowed faintly on the ground. Yukito quickly retrieved it and took a bite, noting a faint flavor that reminded him of pears or apples. The taste itself mattered little. What mattered was its effect. As he checked his system window, he confirmed that his stats had indeed improved. The fruit's enhancement was modest, yet it was proof that with time, even someone like him could grow stronger. Motivated by this success, Yukito launched into an unrelenting hunt. He cut down tree ants, collected their magical fruits, and consumed them one after another. The routine became exhausting, both physically and mentally. By the end of the day, the repetitive flavor had grown unbearable. Seeking relief, Yukito turned to the food that Nozomi had packed for him. The simple meal provided comfort, reviving his energy for a final push. After finishing, he checked his progress and was pleased to find that he had finally advanced to the intermediate combat level. With this milestone reached, he decided it was time to bring his expedition to a close and return. Just as Yukito was preparing to leave, an unsettling feeling washed over him. He sensed the presence of others nearby. His instincts urged him to turn sharply, scanning the clearing. From the shadows, two men emerged. One of them grinned, his mouth lined with golden teeth that gleamed in the dim light. The other wore a conspicuous ring on his finger. Their intentions were immediately apparent. Yukito addressed them sternly, questioning their lack of adventurer credentials. He asked if they were the type to exploit others for profit. The shorter man confirmed with a sneer, remarking that Yukito was nothing more than a spoiled brat relying on equipment. His companion added a thinly veiled threat, suggesting that if Yukito surrendered his belongings willingly, they might spare his life. Yukito faced the two brigands with unshaken resolve. The skirmish had been intense, but he managed to subdue them quickly. Though it felt close, the sequence of events flowed almost seamlessly, as if fortune had carefully guided his every move. His first opponent had unleashed Beasting Lunge, a skill associated with adventurers at level 25. It was far beyond Yukito's current rank, and under ordinary circumstances, he should not have survived it. The skill guaranteed a strike that no enemy could evade, though its attack power was reduced by 30% to compensate for its certainty. The blow connected, yet Yukito endured. His survival was due entirely to his clothing, which had been soaked in tears of silver slime. The strange material lessened the power of incoming attacks, and in this instance, only 30% of the strike's true force reached his body. Without such luck, his stomach would have been pierced clean through, leaving him dead on the forest floor. The injured man collapsed, and his partner looked on in horror. Shock registered in his voice as he remarked that Yamada had been knocked unconscious with a single strike. The disbelief in his tone betrayed his fear. Yukito seized the moment and urged the second man to surrender, assuring him that it was the only way to preserve his life. The brigand refused. His voice rang out defiantly, insisting that a warrior could easily be overwhelmed at range. Yukito acknowledged the truth of those words. At such a distance, his sword would not be able to reach his opponent. The brigand interpreted this as a concession, his grin widening as if victory was assured. However, Yukito had no intention of conceding. With practiced calm, he activated his inventory portal. Reaching inside, he withdrew an artifact that glimmered with bizarre colors. His decision surprised even himself, for he rarely relied on such unstable objects. In his hand appeared a staff unlike any ordinary weapon. Its surface shifted with a spectrum of chaotic hues, as though reality itself resisted its presence. The robber scoffed upon seeing it. To him, the staff looked unimpressive, almost like a child's toy. Confident in his own magical equipment, he laughed at Yukito's choice, mocking the ignorance of a newcomer who did not even know how to wield what he carried. Yukito ignored the jeers and raised the weapon firmly. This staff, the substance of ridiculousness, had been obtained when he defeated the Baron Ant. Though outwardly dismissed as junk, it carried a reputation for extreme unpredictability. The brigand believed he was facing an amateur's folly. In his mind, the staff was worthless. The substance of ridiculousness activated random spells without regard for the user's will. The odds were heavily stacked against Yukito. There was a 40% chance of failure, a 30% chance of weak enchantments, a 20% chance of buffs or debuffs, and only a 9% chance of producing a mid-level spell. Even to trigger something moderately useful was already considered incredible luck. To cast anything beyond that was thought impossible. The outlaw decided to end the contest quickly. He summoned a fireball, a spell of medium tier, and directed it toward Yukito. His mage's staff, designed specifically for battle, enhanced his casting power by 50%, making his attack devastating. In his confidence, he declared that no random trick could possibly overcome equipment designed for destruction. He was certain that beginner's luck would not rescue Yukito this time. The fireball hurtled through the air, its heat distorting the space around it. Yukito did not move, his stance remained calm, his expression detached as if waiting for a result only he could foresee. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he whispered to himself that at last, the staff had begun to stir. He closed one eye, prepared for either fortune or death, then channeled his intent into the unstable artifact. The substance of ridiculousness reacted with violent force. Energy pulsed through it, and the forest quaked as if a volcano had erupted nearby. Flames burst forth, consuming the air with a roar so loud it echoed across the dungeon floor. Yukito raised the staff and aimed directly at his enemy, his expression devoid of emotion. Fire spilled outward, tearing through trees and soil alike, erasing everything in its path. The brigand's confident smile vanished. He stared wide-eyed at the torrent of destruction and felt terror grip his heart. The fireball he had conjured was swallowed instantly by the overwhelming surge. His mind could not comprehend what he was witnessing. This was no simple spell. It was Meteor, one of the most devastating incantations known. Panic consumed him. He clutched his head in disbelief, questioning how a mere boy had managed to reproduce a spell of such magnitude. The odds of the staff producing this result were almost non-existent, no more than a fraction of a percent. He told himself it had to be illusion magic, a trick of the senses. Yet the searing heat on his skin and the smell of his own hair burning proved otherwise. The flames spread not only across the ground but into the sky itself, blotting out everything with crimson light. Fear overwhelmed him. He screamed in desperation, begging Yukito to stop. His bravado crumbled, leaving only raw terror. So great was his panic that he lost control of himself, reduced to a trembling wreck. Yukito did not relent until the surrounding forest had been reduced to blackened ash. The brigand was stripped of all menace, collapsing to the ground in humiliation. His body shrank within the aftermath, transformed into something small and pitiful, as if the spell had reverted him to a helpless state. The destructive force of the meteor spell, however, came at a cost. The substance of ridiculousness cracked beneath the strain. Its surface split apart, unable to withstand the power it had unleashed. Yukito studied the broken remains with a calm gaze, noting how fragile it now seemed. After a moment, he discarded the staff, casting it aside as useless debris. Yukito stood quietly on the battlefield, staring at the aftermath of his victory. For a moment he seemed stunned by what had happened, as if the events had unfolded too quickly for his mind to catch up. The two defeated bandits lay at his feet, groaning in pain, and Yukito considered the situation carefully. Leaving them unattended in such a place was not an option. They could regain their strength, escape, and cause more trouble later. He decided that immobilizing them was the safest course of action. After binding their hands tightly with rope, he felt a sense of relief, convinced that this would be enough to prevent further resistance. Dragging the unconscious criminals behind him, Yukito began the long climb back up the stairs leading out of the dungeon. His mind wandered as he pulled their limp bodies along, reflecting on how the entire ordeal resembled the mechanics of a computer game. Clearing enemies, securing loot, and then dragging the spoils back to the surface. It all felt strangely unreal. When he finally emerged into daylight, he wasted no time in turning both men over to the police. The interrogations stretched on until the sun had already crossed the horizon. Yukito sat quietly, answering questions with as much clarity as he could, but exhaustion pressed down on him. By the time the police released him, he realized just how drained he truly was. Despite his desire to go straight home, another obligation awaited him. He made his way to the Adventurers Guild office, knowing that he had to report his activities. At the reception desk, he offered a brief apology for being out of touch, explaining that unexpected difficulties had delayed him. The receptionist, a cheerful young woman, looked up at him with a smile and confirmed his name. She explained that the police had already informed the guild of his exploits. To his surprise, she congratulated him warmly and announced that his adventurer rank had been upgraded to silver. For a moment, Yukito stood frozen, unable to believe what he had heard. The promotion felt undeserved. Advancing to silver rank was a serious accomplishment, one that even talented adventurers often spent years working toward. Most adventurers were required to secure rare items, defeat powerful monsters, and consistently contribute to the guild before such recognition was granted. Yet the receptionist reassured him that there had been no mistake. His capture of Yamada Jinbei and Hashimoto Hiroshi, both members of the notorious Red Arm Gang, was considered an achievement of great importance. The realization struck him hard. He had gained enough points simply by defeating 2 criminals to be promoted. The receptionist further explained that both men were considered to possess strength equivalent to silver rank adventurers. Yukito felt a chill as he reflected on how dangerous his situation had truly been. Without his extraordinary luck, he might have been the one lying dead in the dungeon. Taking the silver pendant from her hands, Yukito examined it closely before placing it around his neck. He whispered that his survival had only been thanks to luck, though the receptionist dismissed his modesty as unnecessary. She reminded him that silver-ranked adventurers could descend as far as the 30th floor of the dungeon, while bronze ranks were limited to the 10th. Only gold ranks had no restrictions. With the pendant resting against his chest, Yukito quietly resolved to reach at least the 20th floor. The receptionist encouraged him, but she also warned that the deeper sections of the dungeon were perilous. It was unwise to attempt them alone. Yukito thanked her for her concern, then turned to leave. As he walked away, he noticed her gaze following him, her eyes reflecting both respect and curiosity. A faint smile tugged at his lips as he thought about how much faster he had grown compared to his expectations. Meeting the brigands had been a twist of fate, one that luck had steered in his favor. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice calling out. An elderly man dressed in a tall hat and fine coat approached him politely and asked for a moment of his time. Yukito stopped, sensing the weight in the man's tone. The old man confirmed that he was indeed the adventurer who had defeated the 2 criminals. He then recited the names and crimes of Yamada Jinbei and Hashimoto Hiroshi, both murderers with rewards of 1 million yen each on their heads. Yukito simply explained that they had attacked him, nothing more. The old man's hands trembled as he suddenly grasped Yukito's arm. Tears welled in his eyes as he revealed that the 2 criminals had murdered his son. The police had been unable to bring them to justice, yet Yukito had succeeded. Overcome with emotion, the old man tore the wanted posters from the notice board and thanked Yukito with all his heart. Though Yukito tried to downplay his role, insisting that he was merely fulfilling his duty as an adventurer, the man bowed deeply, his gratitude spilling forth. Yukito felt his chest tighten as the man vowed to deliver the good news to his son's grave. For the first time in either his current or previous life, he was receiving gratitude that carried such deep sincerity. He stared at his own hands, realizing how meaningful such words could be. Yet alongside that warmth came a darker thought. He remembered that in his previous life, the world had eventually been destroyed. If history repeated itself, the same fate awaited them once he grew older. He pondered the enormity of that possibility. Could he stand idle, knowing what was to come? A surge of determination rose, but he quickly forced himself to calm down. He was far too weak to think about saving the world. Right now, his focus had to remain on protecting his mother. Anything beyond that was a burden too heavy to bear. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit dungeon elsewhere, a man seethed with rage. A single kerosene lamp cast flickering shadows across a rough stone table, illuminating daggers of all shapes spread across its surface. The man slammed his fists down in fury, struggling to accept that Yamada and Hashimoto had been defeated. Their downfall threatened the stability of the Red Arm Gang. Without their presence, paying tribute to their overlord, Gryla, would become impossible. His gaze fell on a newspaper laid across the table. A photograph of Takahashi Yukito stared back at him from the front page. With a snarl, the man plunged one of his daggers directly into the printed image, promising himself that he would see Yukito destroyed. After venting his anger, he calmed himself enough to think clearly. This young adventurer was no ordinary opponent. If he had managed to overcome Yamada and Hashimoto alone, then his abilities, or at least his uncanny luck, made him dangerous. The man's expression hardened as he considered his next move. Yukito's strength did not matter as much as the mysterious fortune that seemed to shield him. However, luck alone would not save him forever. The moment the head of the Red Arm Gang turned his gaze toward Yukito, his luck would end. A short while later, Yukito set out again, determined to continue his exploration. His progress through the dungeon was steady, and before long, he found himself standing on the 15th floor. The air was sharp and heavy, filled with the scent of stone and dust. He stood on the jagged plane of the mountain, gazing across the bleak expanse. This was the peak of the lonely Mountain of Death, a place infamous among adventurers. Countless narrow passages split the terrain, twisting unpredictably through the cliffs and crags. The geography made it one of the most treacherous floors in the dungeon. Groups struggled to move efficiently here, often forced to travel in single file, unable to fight effectively as a unit. Yukito observed other adventurers attempting to push their way through, only to be slowed by the terrain itself. His sharp eyes noted how easy it was to disappear on this floor, which was precisely why so many criminals used it as their hiding place. Raising his sword, Yukito slammed the blade against the rock, sending out a sharp ring that echoed across the mountain. The strike drew attention, but he cared little. To him, this place was the perfect battlefield for someone like himself. Lone hunters thrived here, and Yukito intended to use the environment to his advantage. This was where he could continue to strengthen himself, sharpen his skills, and prepare for the challenges that awaited on the 20th floor. He drew his sword again, this time facing a massive bird that swooped down from the cliffs. Initially, Yukito had been content with defeating silver slimes to accumulate strength, yet his success against them had gone so far that they no longer appeared before him. With that option exhausted, he shifted strategies. He resolved to hunt as many monsters as possible to both grow stronger and gather useful items. One after another, the creatures came. Yukito battled a giant bird with wings wide enough to darken the rocks below, then faced the thick-shelled charge of a ravenous armadillo. Strange one-eyed creatures ambushed him from crevices, while a towering bear roared its challenge. Each time, Yukito cut them down, his silver slime sword flashing in the dim light of the dungeon. The spoils piled up as he claimed a bow, a finely crafted sword, and a pair of enchanted gloves. Unbeknownst to him, a pair of eyes watched from the shadows. The leader of the Scarlet Hands gang crouched behind the rocks, studying Yukito's every move. He noted the young man's solitude, the gleam of the silver slime sword, and the absence of armor. Despite these apparent weaknesses, Yukito fought like a seasoned warrior. The gang leader could scarcely believe what he was seeing. For this stranger to step boldly into his territory was an insult. Rage flared within him, but caution soon followed. Rather than striking immediately, he decided it was wiser to wait for the right moment. Throughout the day, the bandit leader remained hidden, silently observing as Yukito fought monster after monster. When he saw the young adventurer pause to rest, he felt a surge of inspiration. There was no need for a direct confrontation. The 15th floor belonged to him, after all, and he could make use of its nature. Monsters and predators maintained an uneasy balance within their ecosystem. If that balance was disrupted, chaos would follow. The gang leader returned to his den with a plan forming in his mind. By reducing the number of certain predators, he could force the multiplication of other creatures at an uncontrollable rate. Once the pyramid of balance collapsed, the resulting flood of monsters would make the entire area hazardous. He would then direct that chaos at Yukito. To outside eyes, it would appear as nothing more than another tragic accident. Adventurers perished in dungeons every day. No one would question such a death. By the next morning, the bandit had made his preparations. In his pouch, he carried an item designed to repel specific types of monster insects. With it, he could steer them away from himself and straight toward his chosen prey. His scheme was simple, ruthless, and effective. With cruel satisfaction, he ordered the swarm to descend upon Yukito. Meanwhile, Yukito had just finished slaying a wild boar when a strange noise reached his ears. It grew louder with every passing second until the very sky seemed to darken. Looking upward, he saw a black cloud hovering overhead. His heart sank as realization struck. It was not a cloud, but a massive swarm of deadly insects. The scale of the swarm was overwhelming. Yukito quickly understood that he could not handle such a threat alone. His mind raced as he searched for options. Survival meant finding others. Somewhere on this floor, groups of adventurers should have established a supply base. The memory surfaced from his past life. He had once heard of a base built here, meant to make defending the lonely mountain of death more manageable. It was said to be located in a cave marked by red-colored soil. The problem was that his current map held no marker for such a place. Desperation mounted as the swarm descended. A massive chasm yawned before him, cutting across his path. Stopping was not an option. Using his sword as an anchor, Yukito slid swiftly down the sheer cliff face. Reaching the bottom, he pushed forward and scrambled up another incline, where the soil shifted in hue. The red clay of the mountain confirmed he was close. Panting heavily, he reached the base of a wall that seemed unyielding. He shouted for help, hoping someone inside would hear him, but there was no response. The rock face remained unchanged, offering no passage. Glancing over his shoulder, Yukito saw the black swarm surging closer, the sound of countless wings filling the air. His options dwindled rapidly. He pressed his back to the wall and prepared to defend himself, no longer expecting rescue. Yet in that moment of desperation, he thought of another approach. Raising his sword, he struck at the rock, testing whether it concealed a hidden entrance. To his astonishment, the wall gave way, revealing a tunnel. Inside, a horrifying sight met his eyes. Men and women lay scattered across the floor, stripped to their undergarments, their hands and feet bound tightly, their mouths sealed with strips of cloth. Their faces turned toward him as he entered, eyes wide with fear yet filled with desperate hope. Yukito stepped deeper into the cavern, his eyes narrowing at the strange scene before him. Dozens of people lay scattered across the floor, men and women alike, dressed only in undergarments, their hands and feet bound, and their mouths gagged. For a brief moment, he wondered if he had stumbled into the lair of some perverse association, yet the truth quickly became evident. None of the captives responded to his arrival, their muffled cries the only sounds that filled the hollow space. It was clear they were prisoners, stripped of dignity and abandoned to despair. Moving swiftly, Yukito cut through the bindings with precise strokes of his sword. His movements were lightning fast, each swing carrying years of honed experience. The captives flinched as the ropes fell, then looked at him with wide, grateful eyes. They had long since given up hope of escape, and now this stranger had appeared, delivering them from certain death. Relief and disbelief mixed in their faces, yet the urgency of the moment allowed no time for questions. Once freed, they struggled to their feet, shaky and disoriented. Yukito asked what had happened. One of them, his voice hoarse, explained that they had been attacked by bandits and then swiftly rendered unconscious. The reason for their survival was clear. They had not been spared out of mercy, but rather kept alive to be sold as slaves. Yukito frowned. He realized he had stumbled upon the operations of a criminal group. This cave was supposed to serve as a supply point for adventurers in the future, yet in the present moment it was being used as a prison. Local law enforcement would eventually reclaim this place and transform it into an official base, but Yukito had arrived too early in this timeline. He caught himself drifting into thoughts of his past life, recalling how he had wasted 10 long years in trivial pursuits like slime hunting, never paying attention to how the world changed around him. Yet now was not the time for reflection. A more pressing danger loomed outside the cave. He could still hear the faint buzzing in the distance, the ominous sound of countless wings. The swarm of ravenous insects was closing in quickly, and the rescued captives were in no condition to defend themselves. Yukito raised his hand and pointed to the sky outside. He explained the situation in urgent tones, making it clear that a massive cloud of predatory insects was descending upon them. If they remained idle, they would all be devoured. The captives rushed to the mouth of the cave, disbelief etched into their faces as they saw the black cloud drawing nearer. Fear spread quickly among them, their panic threatening to erupt into chaos. The sheer number of monsters seemed insurmountable, and hopelessness took hold. Yukito spoke firmly, telling them there was no time for hesitation. If they wished to survive, they had to fight alongside him. Skepticism flickered in their eyes. Some argued that they had no weapons, others whispered that they could not possibly stand against so many enemies. A young woman, her voice trembling, reminded everyone that their gear had been stripped away by the bandits. Yukito answered by drawing upon his unique ability. With a surge of energy, he activated the system, materializing items from his accumulated rewards. Weapons and armor shimmered into existence, stacking neatly within the cavern. Swords, bows, shields, and sets of armor appeared as though conjured from the air itself. The captives stared in astonishment. None of them had ever seen equipment of such quality gathered in one place. Some muttered that these items alone could fetch a fortune, while others wondered aloud how Yukito had acquired them. He explained calmly that they were spoils from his battles and that he was willing to distribute them freely. He asked nothing in return except that they allow him to lead them in the coming fight. For a brief moment, disbelief lingered, but as they touched the weapons and felt the weight of armor on their bodies, their hesitation gave way to resolve. Survival outweighed suspicion. One by one, they armed themselves. A young man with a stocky build volunteered to act as a decoy, while others chose bows and swords to suit their strengths. A red-haired woman claimed a bow with a steady hand, her confidence returning as she tested the drawstring. She smiled faintly and pledged to follow his lead. Soon, all of them consented, acknowledging Yukito as their commander in this dire situation. Gratitude mixed with desperation, binding them to him in that crucial moment. Yukito, however, carried no trace of amusement. As he stood at the entrance of the cave, memories from his past life surged within him. He recalled his own death, the helplessness of facing overwhelming odds, and the bitter regret of wasted years. Now, given this second chance, he felt a deep sense of responsibility. This was not merely a fight for survival but an opportunity to lead, to redeem what he had lost. He surveyed the group, noting the fear in some faces and determination in others. He understood that many of them had never fought in such conditions, yet he believed that together they could withstand the swarm. Raising his sword high, Yukito declared the start of their defense. When the monsters finally reached the cave, Yukito met them head-on. His blade flashed as he cut them down one by one, each swing fueled by precision and instinct. The narrow passage worked in his favor, preventing the swarm from overwhelming them all at once. Every movement was calculated, every strike designed to thin the relentless tide. His strategy had been sound, and the small group at his side followed his lead with determination. The red-haired woman loosed arrows without pause, striking targets before they reached the front. Beside her, a short but skilled young mage channeled bursts of energy that tore through the insect horde. Together, they held their ground against the encroaching threat. The swarm pressed harder, so numerous that the cave entrance disappeared completely beneath the writhing mass. Despite the defenders' best efforts, more monsters poured in with no end in sight. Fatigue began to weigh on the rescued prisoners. Their earlier resolve faltered, and hopelessness spread through the ranks as the insects continued to advance. Though dozens of enemies had already been destroyed, despair gnawed at their spirits. Yukito Takahashi understood the situation was deteriorating. Even with his experience, he was uncertain whether he could change the course of this battle. His doubts grew heavier when the ground beneath them trembled. The walls quivered and chunks of stone fell from the ceiling, signaling that the cavern's stability was collapsing under the relentless pressure of the swarm. Without hesitation, Yukito ordered the group to retreat deeper into the tunnel while maintaining their formation. Panic threatened to break them apart, but his commanding presence kept them moving. The swarm grew thicker, tearing at the rock itself. Fear spread rapidly, and some believed death was inevitable. Yukito forced himself to remain calm, analyzing every detail in search of a solution. Then his eyes fell on an object lying discarded near one of the branching tunnels. It was a block of explosives, most likely left behind by the crawlers who had expanded the passages. For the first time since the battle began, Yukito saw a glimmer of hope. He grabbed the device, recognizing it as their chance for survival. He ordered the others to search the cavern for more explosives. At once, the group scattered, desperate to find anything that might serve as a weapon. Several pieces were discovered, proving that the bandits had indeed used them to widen the tunnels. Hope rekindled in the eyes of the exhausted fighters as they clutched the blocks of dynamite. For hours they continued their desperate struggle, fending off the insects while scavenging for more explosives. By the time their efforts slowed, only a third of the cavern remained intact. Retreat was no longer an option. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them all. One of the women collapsed, her mana completely drained, while the walls groaned under the strain of collapse. Yukito felt the weight of command pressing upon him. He recognized that no ordinary defense would save them now. Closing his eyes briefly, he made a decision. There was only one option left. He called out for everyone to hand over the explosives they had collected. Reluctantly, they obeyed, although their faces betrayed deep doubt. Many whispered that even with all the dynamite combined, they could not possibly destroy the entire swarm. To them, it seemed like trying to hold water in their hands. Nevertheless, they trusted him enough to comply. Yukito gathered the explosives into his arms, resolved to risk everything. If the ceiling collapsed, the rocks would bury the swarm along with him. The insects, drawn by instinct, always targeted the greatest threat. As the one who had cut down the most of their kind, Yukito knew their focus was fixed on him. This gave the others a chance to survive. Before he could act, one of the women cried out that the ceiling had already cracked open, stones tumbling in dangerous showers. Their captain urged everyone to flee immediately. Some of the fighters shouted at Yukito, demanding to know if he truly intended to sacrifice himself. His only response was a calm smile. He asked for their trust, then turned to face the encroaching swarm alone. Clutching the explosives, Yukito knew the risks. The system had already warned him that he possessed no specialized detonation skill. The chance of failure was high, but his unusual luck had carried him this far. Another notification appeared, stating the damaged items held only a 25% chance of ignition. It was far from certain, yet he chose to believe in the outcome. With a steady hand, he prepared the charges. The explosion ripped through the cavern with a deafening roar. Stone shattered, and the ceiling collapsed, sending a rain of boulders crashing down upon the swarm. Yukito was thrown into the abyss below, his body hurled by the shockwave. The swarm followed him, their wings buzzing furiously as they dove after him. He fought even in freefall, swinging his sword at the nearest insects. His silver blade cut with unerring accuracy, buying him precious moments. Spinning in midair, he struck out again with his dissecting kick, his body twisting like that of an acrobat. Each strike landed true, his luck sharpening every motion. A single massive insect remained, meeting his gaze with unyielding fury. Yukito steeled himself for the final blow, channeling all his strength into a critical strike. His attack connected, blasting the creature away as he tried to push himself toward the edge of the abyss. For a moment, it seemed fortune was with him once again. Yet when he drove his sword into the rock wall to halt his fall, the blade slipped free. The weapon failed to catch, and he plummeted further, his survival hanging by a thread. Just as the abyss threatened to claim him, a rope whipped down from above, looping around his arm. His allies had not abandoned him. They pulled with all their strength, one after another, straining until Yukito was dragged back to solid ground. Breathing heavily, he collapsed onto the stone, his body trembling with relief. Around him lay the broken remains of countless insects, their corpses scattered among fallen rocks. The survivors gathered, staring in awe at the devastation. They marveled that despite facing such overwhelming odds, not a single life had been lost. The battle had seemed hopeless, yet they had emerged victorious. Yukito rose slowly, pride swelling within him as he surveyed the aftermath. His gamble had worked. He had led strangers through the jaws of death, turning them into comrades through sheer determination and faith. The system announced his success. A large number of deadly insects had been destroyed, and his contribution had earned him recognition. His damage against insect-type monsters was recorded at 20%. His level advanced to 3, and a new skill appeared in his arsenal, Warrior Intuition. The bald bandit was consumed with rage after his carefully planned scheme had failed. He kicked the table violently, his veins bulging as he cursed his misfortune. His hand clutched at his head as he thought about the destruction of their base. That scumbag Takahashi Yukito had ruined everything, and the gang leader realized that the consequences of failure could very well cost him his life. In his anger, the bandit grabbed a bottle from the table, uncorked it with a sharp twist, and took long greedy gulps. The burning liquid seemed to do nothing to calm his fury. Once the bottle was nearly empty, he hurled it at the wall where it shattered into countless splinters. With a snarl, he made a personal vow that he would finish Yukito with his own hands. The thought of revenge became an obsession that consumed his every breath, and he was ready to risk his life if necessary. While the gang leader seethed with hatred, Yukito had already finished his business on the lower level of the dungeon. He made his way to the company office, his expression calm yet focused. As soon as he stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. Everyone present immediately turned their attention toward him, some with awe, others with curiosity. Yukito noted silently that recognition had become more frequent lately, and his presence never went unnoticed anymore. The woman behind the counter offered him a bright smile. She declared that he had once again demonstrated his strength magnificently. Word had spread quickly about his feats, and now he was often referred to as the Mountain Crusher, the one who saved countless lives. Various guild representatives were constantly seeking him out, eager to recruit him into their ranks. That day, however, Yukito had little patience for discussions. He apologized briefly, explained that he was in a hurry, and dismissed their invitations without hesitation. Although offers were plentiful, Yukito knew he was not yet permitted to join a guild. His mind was fixed on more pressing concerns. He thought about the elixir he wanted to create for his mother, a task that would demand time, resources, and relentless effort. Under the current circumstances, crafting such an elixir would not be possible anytime soon. He also recognized that working in teams would not guarantee him better results. Loot distribution among guild members was randomized, drastically lowering his chances of obtaining rare items. Through careful calculations, Yukito concluded that the larger the guild, the smaller his winning percentage would become. Rather than being discouraged, he reminded himself of his past life. He had cleared dungeons alone before, and he could do it again. There was no need to alter a method that had proven effective. With his business concluded, Yukito left the office and returned home. At home, his mother and younger sister Nozomi had prepared a warm dinner, filling the small house with a comforting aroma. Yukito felt his stomach growl. The hunger from his adventures had caught up with him. Before eating, the family folded their hands in prayer, offering gratitude for the food on the table. Only then did they begin their meal, savoring each bite. The taste was rich and familiar, evoking memories from Yukito's past life. Despite never being wealthy, their family always found ways to celebrate together, especially on meaningful days. Nozomi, with a bright smile, congratulated her brother for reaching level 20. Their mother, however, could not hide her concern. She worried deeply, reminding Yukito that after the 20th level, the difficulty of dungeons rose sharply. Nozomi added that she too was worried, since only a small fraction of hunters were able to progress beyond that stage. Their mother scolded her daughter gently for speaking with her phone in hand at the dinner table, but it did little to ease her own anxiety. She turned her gaze back to her son, asking if he truly believed he could handle the trials that lay ahead. Yukito assured them that everything was under control. He asked if they had forgotten what he was capable of. His mother sighed softly, admitting that she was proud of all he had achieved. Behind her on the wall hung newspaper articles with Yukito's picture, reminders of his growing reputation. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes as emotions welled up inside. When she spoke again, her voice trembled as she asked him to take care of himself. No mother wanted to see her child sacrifice everything for others. Yukito fell silent. A painful memory surfaced, one of a different lifetime where he had buried his mother after failing to protect her. The image pierced him deeply, making his chest tighten. He addressed her with affection, hiding his sorrow as best he could. Nozomi intervened quickly, telling their mother to stop pressing him further since nothing she said would change his mind. Belle, his sister's friend who often joined them, laughed softly, pointing out how stubborn Yukito always was. Once he decided on something, there was no convincing him otherwise. Tears formed in their mother's eyes as she recalled her late husband. The resemblance between Yukito and Nozomi to their father was undeniable. Yukito looked at her and told her firmly not to worry. He insisted he was doing all this because he truly wanted to. Unable to argue, his mother returned to her meal in silence. As the family continued eating, Yukito's thoughts wandered. He stared at his reflection in a glass of water and admitted inwardly that in his past life, he had failed to save his mother. The memory bled into his heart like an old wound that never healed. He knew he needed to erase the pain of the past by starting a new life. To achieve that, he had to obtain the magic elixir no matter the cost. Once the meal was finished, Yukito folded his hands again, offering thanks for the food. He complimented his family on the delicious dinner before rising from his seat. After resting briefly at home, he prepared himself to head into the dungeon once more. Descending the stairs, he ran through possible scenarios in his mind, planning carefully for what awaited him. The system message appeared before his eyes. It confirmed the destination, Tokyo Dungeon, level 20. The quest had been marked as the Stubborn Alchemist's Trial. A massive wall loomed ahead, defying every known law of physics, a new challenge that promised to test both his strength and his luck. Yukito saw danger ahead and ran forward with determination, his sword gripped tightly in his hands. The monsters before him were unlike ordinary creatures. Their bodies resembled twisted hybrids of machines and skeletons, their frames surrounded by a pulsating red aura that radiated hostility. He remembered that the enemies on this floor were inorganic constructs, created without life or soul, designed only to kill. With incredible speed, he advanced, striking at two of them almost at the same time, his movements guided by instinct and experience. The monsters were merciless killers, operating without emotion or hesitation. Some among them possessed jagged wings and dove at him from above. Despite their numbers, their actions followed predictable patterns. Yukito quickly realized that this mechanical rhythm gave him an advantage. By anticipating their movements, he could dismantle them with precise swings of his sword. Steel clashed against hard shells, and piece after piece of shattered fragments fell in his path as he forced his way deeper into the floor. Then a massive shadow appeared in the distance, halting his advance. A towering figure emerged from the darkness, its body carved entirely from stone. A single fiery eye glared at him from the middle of its forehead. The surrounding aura blazed, warning of the immense threat it posed. Yukito acknowledged silently that this was no ordinary opponent. It was stronger, larger, and far more dangerous. He decided quickly that memorizing the creature's movements would be the key to survival. The cyclopean monster clenched its massive fist and struck at him with overwhelming force. Yukito barely evaded, the ground trembling as cracks spread outward from the impact. He darted around the monster, leaping with agility to avoid being crushed. Physical strength alone was not enough to compete with such a giant, so he relied on cunning. His sharp eyes traced every motion, looking for the creature's core. Once he found it, he struck decisively, piercing the weak spot. The stone monster collapsed heavily, its eyes dimming as its body crumbled. Landing safely on solid ground, Yukito stood victorious. This success brought him closer to his true goal. He approached a towering set of doors at the end of the passage. With steady hands, he pushed them open. As they creaked apart, a golden glow spilled out, filling the darkness with light. He whispered within himself that from this moment on, a new chapter of his life was about to begin. The glow led him into a spherical chamber. Symbols covered the floor, strange and obscure, glowing faintly beneath his feet. The heavy doors sealed shut behind him, cutting off any path of retreat. At the center of the hall stood a colossal stone golem, its moss-covered body looming over the symbols. Identical runes glowed across its shoulders, marking it as the guardian of the chamber. Yukito knew immediately what he faced. This was the ancient golem, the level 20 boss, protector of the treasure hidden on this floor. Its monstrous frame radiated immense strength, its movements slow but charged with destructive power. This was the very opponent he had prepared to face, the challenge that drove him to reach the 20th floor with relentless speed. The golem attacked as soon as he moved. Its strikes carried terrifying force, yet its speed was not unmanageable. Yukito leapt upward, driving his sword against the monster's stone head. His goal was not to destroy it outright but to chip away at its armor until the core within could be reached. Breaking that would end the fight. His plan was precise, every strike aiming to weaken its protection. Unbeknownst to him, someone else was present. Watching from the shadows near the doorway, the bald bandit leader glared with hatred. His plan against Yukito had failed once before, and now he sought revenge. Seeing the battle unfold, he hoped desperately that luck would finally abandon the young man. The symbols on the ground blazed with crimson light. Suddenly, another colossal figure rose from the glowing pattern, emerging in full size beside the first golem. Its core shimmered with blue and purple light. Yukito froze briefly, realizing that this floor held not one guardian but two. His thoughts turned sharply to the closed door. The appearance of the second boss could only mean that someone else had triggered it. He sensed no foreign presence, yet suspicion gnawed at him. Before he could locate the intruder, a dagger flew toward his back. Reflexes and uncanny luck saved him as he deflected the strike with a swift motion. The weapon rebounded like a boomerang into the shadows. Yukito understood immediately. Someone had set a trap. Hidden nearby, the bandit leader cursed under his breath. Once again, Yukito had survived what should have been a fatal strike. The thief reminded himself that ordinary hunters could never escape his attacks. His disguise skills kept him invisible to the golems, and his higher-level thief class allowed him to manipulate the battlefield without fear. He had even equipped an S-rank invisibility cloak, ensuring he could not be detected. With poison-coated daggers and elaborate traps, he prepared to torment Yukito further, restricting his movements with barbed wire and constant sneak attacks. Yukito continued fighting both golems, striking at their armor and aiming for their cores, all while dodging unseen blades. To the bandit, it seemed inevitable that the young man would soon be crushed under the combined pressure of two bosses. Confident of victory, he laughed silently, watching from concealment. His satisfaction did not last. Suddenly, Yukito's eyes locked on his position. The young man lunged forward, sword extended with terrifying precision. The bandit broke into a sweat, his disbelief written across his face. Yukito's smile carried a quiet confidence. The bandit realized too late that his invisibility had been pierced. He demanded to know how Yukito had spotted him. The answer came with a calm explanation that hunting instincts had guided him, a skill that allowed him to sense his surroundings no matter how well hidden the enemy was. The bandit refused to believe it, his anger boiling over. He pulled out both blades, veins bulging on his forehead, ready to strike back. Weapons clashed violently, sparks scattering across the chamber. The force of impact echoed through the hall. Yukito stood unmoved, his stance firm, while the bandit was hurled backward by the shockwave, crashing against the ground. The young man looked down at him with a smile that carried quiet certainty. Yukito declared with composure that such words of superiority belonged only to the victor. Yukito swung his sword with decisive force, flicking his opponent away from him in a single motion. The bald bandit leader stumbled back, but his anger remained unbroken. He demanded to know when Yukito had discovered his hiding place and how he had managed to detect him despite the invisibility cloak. His rage grew as he accused Yukito of lying, insisting that no warrior's intuition could possibly expose him. Yukito refused to explain. There was no need for words when the truth lay in his skills. Long ago, he had activated the ability known as warrior intuition. It was a rare skill that heightened awareness of danger in one's surroundings, yet the chance of its activation was incredibly low. Failure stood at 99%, success at less than 1%, and great success at only 0.1%. The odds were impossible for most, yet Yukito relied on something far more powerful than probability. His smile revealed his confidence that his extraordinary luck would carry him through. A glowing message appeared before his eyes, announcing his great success. The system congratulated him, and a new sense spread through his mind. It was as if a radar had awakened inside him, pinpointing every source of danger across the battlefield. The bandit charged again, moving at a speed beyond what his level should allow. Yet Yukito calmly raised his blade, thanking his enemy for the unintentional compliment before preparing to repel the assault. Their battle resumed, blades colliding in a flurry of sparks. The bandit shouted that Yukito remained nothing more than a low-ranked warrior, boasting about his superior agility and precision. His threats carried weight, for his swordsmanship was sharp and calculated. With a swift strike, he managed to cut Yukito's arm, drawing blood. He remarked smugly on Yukito's preparation, praising his opponent in a twisted tone before relaxing too soon. In that careless moment, Yukito appeared behind him. His sword descended with lethal intent, ready to end the fight. Yet the bandit's instincts were not dull. He sensed the danger at the final instant, twisting his body midair and narrowly avoiding death. He taunted Yukito, declaring that his situation remained just as dire as before. Yukito did not answer. Instead, he unleashed his sword technique, beasting, channeling his focus into a deadly strike. His opponent only laughed at the attempt, mocking the skill and claiming guaranteed attacks meant nothing against him. He countered with the butterfly dance technique, a move that created the illusion of multiple bodies. To Yukito, the bandit now seemed to exist in several places at once, making it nearly impossible to land a clean hit. Each missed strike left Yukito questioning his timing, while the thief pressed forward with relentless confidence. The bandit spoke continuously, using his words to unnerve while lunging with his blades. He claimed that battles always came down to status in the end, mocking Yukito's low rank. His next assault broke through, slicing into Yukito's leg. Pain coursed through him, his movements slowing as he became vulnerable to further attacks. The bandit shouted with delight, declaring that a slow warrior could never catch him. At that moment, one of the ancient golems turned its attention to the intruders. A beam of energy shot across the chamber, threatening to obliterate everything in its path. Only Yukito's quick reflexes saved him from being struck down. He rolled aside, escaping what could have been a fatal wound. The bandit laughed again, shouting that the 20th floor provided a thrilling ride. He twirled his swords and boasted that he could dodge even the attacks of the boss itself. His secret was analysis, the study of the golem's predictable movements. He mocked Yukito further, asking if he had purchased similar information from the guild. Yukito responded only with silence, focusing on parrying the incoming blade. Their duel continued, weaving dangerously between the stomping feet and attacks of the ancient golems. Suddenly, Yukito felt another surge of pain. Looking down, he saw that his foot had stepped onto one of the bandit's traps. A sharp spike pierced through his leg, blood dripping across the stone floor. The bandit grinned with satisfaction, explaining that he had prepared the entire chamber in advance. According to him, Yukito's defeat had been inevitable from the moment he entered. The bandit then activated his technique, Scorpion Point. His twin swords glowed with mana, and the force of his blows overwhelmed Yukito's defenses. Each clash pushed him backward until a particularly strong strike sent him crashing to the ground. His weapon fell from his hand, clattering across the floor. Dizzy and battered, he struggled to rise. Seeing this, the bandit announced the end. His blades gleamed as he advanced, certain of victory. Yukito appeared afraid, his expression shaken. Yet in the next breath, his demeanor shifted. He stuck out his tongue in mockery, declaring his fear nothing more than a joke. He raised his hand and activated a trap of his own. A purple sphere enveloped the bandit, locking him within a gravity trap. He gasped in disbelief, unable to comprehend how Yukito had ensnared him. Yukito reminded him that he had boasted earlier about the absence of irregular tactics on the floor, yet the reality proved otherwise. The bandit cursed, realizing too late that his own arrogance had blinded him. Yukito explained calmly that information from the guild applied only to normal circumstances. No one had anticipated that someone reckless enough would challenge the 20th floor boss head-on. Trapped and raging, the bandit shouted that such a thing was impossible, calling Yukito a worthless low-level warrior. The golem's attack interrupted him. One massive strike landed directly where the bandit struggled. The gravity sphere shattered under the impact, and the thief was hurled across the floor. Broken and gasping, he whispered weakly that the pain was unbearable. The colossal guardian reached down with stone fingers, seizing the battered bandit. It lifted him high above the ground before letting go. His body plummeted, slamming into the stone floor with a sickening impact. His blood spread across the surface as his trembling hand tried to rise. Even in his broken state, he whispered that he could not understand how he had overlooked Yukito's traps. His disbelief filled his fading voice, insisting it was impossible for someone of Yukito's level to outwit him. Yukito stepped forward, his expression calm. He reminded the dying man that from the very beginning, his warrior intuition had guided him. The gang leader coughed violently, leaving bloody footprints across the stone floor. Yukito, though wounded, remained standing and reminded the man to conserve what little strength he had left. He added that if the bandit survived long enough for him to defeat the ancient boss, then he would personally drag him to the authorities. Yet the criminal was not as broken as he appeared. The bandit caught his breath and slowly tried to rise, his arms trembling as he pushed himself up. With a low voice, as though speaking to no one, he muttered that he would not be deceived. Thanks to his heightened senses, sharpened by extraordinary luck, Yukito heard the faint whisper clearly. The next instant, the rogue erupted into a furious shout, declaring that if he could not win, he would drag Yukito to hell with him. A long ribbon of ammunition materialized around the man's body, wrapping him in lethal force. He raved that this weapon was far superior to anything Yukito carried. The sight left Yukito stunned, for it seemed as if his enemy had lost all reason. The bandit appeared willing to destroy everything, including himself, in pursuit of vengeance. Without hesitation, he confirmed the system command and initiated detonation. The following explosion ripped through the chamber. Stone shattered and fragments blasted outward in every direction. The violent shockwave reached Yukito, tearing through the floor beneath him. Cracks spread across the surface, and he realized he had no chance to resist. The ground collapsed entirely, and he was swallowed into the darkness below. He fell for what felt like an eternity before slamming into cold stone with brutal force. Pain spread through his body as he clutched his head, grimacing at the impact. Slowly, his eyes adjusted to the shadows. When he looked upward, he could see the faint outline of the opening far above, confirming the distance he had plummeted. For a moment, he could not even stand. After lying still to recover, Yukito finally forced himself upright. To his surprise, he found himself inside a hidden chamber. The discovery left him momentarily speechless. Before he could catch his breath, a massive figure descended through the hole. A golem crashed down from above, reminding him there would be no easy escape from this trial. He clenched his fist and forced himself to stand, though an uneasy thought crossed his mind. He had been cornered. Once more he placed his faith in the luck that had never failed him. Scanning the chamber quickly, his eyes locked onto something unusual. Through a gap in the wall, he spotted a faint glow. Concentrating, he made out the shape of a ladder and a chest radiating magical light. His heart quickened. Yukito smiled faintly, realizing what he had stumbled upon. A secret room and hidden treasure awaited him. Perhaps this was why fate had brought him here. He resolved to reach the chest no matter the cost. Yet before he could move, another figure entered the chamber. The second golem joined the first, both towering guardians standing between him and survival. The room grew suffocatingly small as they advanced. Yukito quickly assessed his chances. He could not defeat two bosses simultaneously, not in his current condition. He needed a different approach, something cunning. His only option was to gamble everything on the treasure chest. Determined, he sprang into motion. With a powerful leap, he tried to slip between the legs of the nearest golem and dash toward the glow. The floor shook as he pushed off with his feet. He climbed onto the golem's massive shoulder and used it as leverage, launching himself forward. The chest came closer with each heartbeat, its light guiding him. Just as he reached for it, the second golem raised its arm and unleashed a searing beam of energy. The blast struck Yukito in the back, sending him spiraling off course. His sword slipped from his grip and clattered to the ground. He crashed violently onto the floor, coughing blood as agony tore through his body. Forcing himself to think clearly, he reassured himself that at least his spine was intact. Yet when he looked up, terror flooded his eyes. The ancient guardian loomed above, preparing to crush him beneath its colossal foot. This time, Yukito could not evade. His injuries slowed him, and his luck seemed to falter. Pain surged through him as the golem's foot came down, crushing his legs with bone-shattering force. Blood streamed across the stone while his vision blurred. The agony nearly drove him into unconsciousness. Still, he clenched his fist and slammed it against the floor, forcing himself not to surrender. The pain grew so overwhelming that bile rose in his throat, but his determination anchored him. Ahead lay the treasure chest, close enough to touch. His fallen sword rested beside it, yet his broken body resisted his will. The golem lifted its foot again, aiming to finish what it had begun. Yukito's vision turned red, his scream echoing across the chamber. He remembered his 70 years in a past life, long and wasted, and realized that this second chance was far shorter than he had imagined. Even so, he refused to let it end here. Through sheer willpower, he began crawling toward the chest. Each movement was agony, yet he dragged himself forward inch by inch. His only thought was of his mother, and the chance to save her drove him onward. Finally, his trembling hand touched the chest. With the last of his strength, he forced it open. A radiant beam of light burst forth, revealing a brilliant blue gem within. Yukito's lips curved into a faint smile despite his torment. He had reached his goal. Inside rested a bracelet adorned with the gem, its aura overflowing with mana. Though death loomed close, hope had returned. The golem raised its foot once more, ready to strike. Yukito grasped the bracelet, recognizing instinctively what he had to do. He slipped it onto his wrist, realizing it was an artifact of great rarity, a bracelet of changeability. The description confirmed that it could teleport its wearer to another location. Time was running out. The guardian's shadow fell over him, its final strike inevitable. Yukito struggled to activate the artifact. It was not designed for his class, meaning the probability of success was abysmally low. Even so, each passing second seemed to tilt fortune slightly in his favor. Clutching the bracelet tightly, Yukito declared in his heart that he had claimed victory. Fate remained on his side, and with this artifact, he would survive against all odds. The instant the stone golem's massive body crashed downward, the bracelet on Yukito's wrist activated. A thunderous impact shook the chamber as the block of stone slammed into the spot where he had just been standing. Dust clouded the air, and silence fell for a brief heartbeat. No sound stirred until the bracelet released a distinctive chime. In that moment, Takahashi Yukito reappeared behind the towering golem, his blade already thrusting toward the glowing magical heart embedded deep in the creature's chest. Victory seemed within reach. His strike was precise, yet the golem reacted violently. With a surge of energy, the boss unleashed a laser beam in a fit of rage. The attack did not register Yukito as the source of the damage, and instead it fired directly at the second golem lying across the battlefield. A crimson ray tore through the air, piercing the chest of its companion. The impact rattled the ground, shaking the walls of the hidden chamber. The second golem staggered, but it did not fall. Despite the severe blow, the monster remained functional, its core pulsing with dim but persistent light. The situation remained critical. Nevertheless, Yukito refused to lose hope. His determination blazed, and his body vanished again as the bracelet activated, shifting him instantly across the battlefield. He materialized above the first boss, which was still attempting to rise, and directed his blade toward the fragile heart. However, his balance faltered. The monster's enormous frame shifted unexpectedly as it pushed itself upright, flinging Yukito off course. His grip loosened and he nearly fell from its back. At that same moment, the second golem advanced, extending its massive hand to seize him. The air whistled as its strike descended toward Yukito's vulnerable form. Anticipating danger, Yukito pressed the bracelet once more. Light wrapped around him, and his body flickered out of the monster's reach. Reappearing behind the first golem, he attacked with renewed intensity, attempting to break through its stony defenses. The advantage of surprise became his strongest weapon. The stone monster roared, swinging wildly to throw him off, but Yukito adapted quickly, shifting positions with rapid precision. He vowed to fight until his final breath, no matter the toll. The monster sensed his relentless strikes and tried desperately to capture him. Yet Yukito moved faster than its reactions, slipping away each time its massive arms swung toward him. He continued to leap from one golem to the other, striking again and again. Each blow chipped away at the defenses surrounding their cores. Gradually, he began to break through, his attacks becoming sharper and more accurate. Sparks flared from each hit, and the protective shells around the hearts weakened. Minutes stretched as the battle raged, his movements relentless and fueled by willpower. He no longer prayed for fortune. Instead, he resolved to fight until luck favored him once more. When he landed between the two stone giants, both monsters locked onto his position. Their red eyes gleamed with murderous intent. They accelerated in unison, preparing to crush him from both sides. Enormous hands swung inward to obliterate him where he stood. Yukito remained calm. With a thought, the bracelet carried him away again, vanishing at the last instant. The two golems, caught in their own momentum, collided. Their attacks smashed directly into one another, and the force shattered parts of their cores. Fragments cracked under the tremendous impact, leaving both creatures weakened. Seizing the opportunity, Yukito reappeared behind the first golem. His blade moved with deadly precision, enhanced by his beast sting skill. The strike pierced straight through, shattering the heart in a burst of energy. The golem trembled, then crumbled as the light in its core extinguished. Without hesitation, Yukito turned to the second monster. He invoked the Storm of Strike's skill, unleashing a flurry of rapid blows. Each hit struck its mark until the final thrust penetrated the weakened core. Energy ruptured from within, and the second golem collapsed in ruin. Both bosses had been defeated. The chamber shook one last time as the remains of the golems disintegrated into heaps of dust and fragments. Exhausted, Yukito lost his footing and tumbled from the high perch he had been fighting upon. He attempted to use the bracelet once more for a softer landing, yet the artifact had reached its limit. No light emerged, and he braced for impact. He fell into a mound of dust left behind by the shattered golems. The soft cushion spared him from severe injury, though the exhaustion pressed heavily upon his body. Despite his weariness, his victory was undeniable. Takahashi Yukito had defeated two ancient bosses in one battle, an achievement beyond expectation. Before him, the dust swirled, and two glowing objects appeared. His eyes widened as he realized what they were. Two legendary elixirs had materialized as his reward. Once again, fortune smiled upon him. Without hesitation, Yukito uncorked one elixir and drank it in a single gulp. The liquid spread through his system instantly. A green radiance enveloped his body, washing away every trace of injury. His shattered legs knit together, bones realigned, and flesh restored. Even the smallest cuts vanished beneath the soothing light. Remarkably, his torn clothes seemed cleansed and renewed as if by magic. Relief filled him. The battle was finally over. Strength surged back into his body, and he stood renewed, brimming with vitality. Not only had he survived, but he had also secured the elixir that could save his mother. As the light faded, notifications from the system echoed in his mind. His efforts had been acknowledged. 3 new titles had been bestowed upon him. Survivor granted an increase of 10 points to defense. Slayer of Golems strengthened him further with 20 additional points to strength. Finally, Enforcer of Justice enhanced his dexterity by 10 points. After some time, Yukito opened his inventory to confirm his spoils. A wave of satisfaction washed over him as he confirmed the rare item was safely secured. His plan had worked perfectly, and the effort had yielded more than he had dared to hope. The only task left now was to escape the dungeon. With determination, he made his way back to the surface. His pace was swift, and in moments he returned to the main hall where the boss had once stood. At the top, something caught his eye. Resting on the ground was the bandit's cape, stained with darkened blood. Yukito picked it up, considering whether this would serve as sufficient proof of the crimes committed. Deciding it might, he folded the cape and placed it among his belongings before heading for the exit. The heavy gate creaked open, and soon he was outside once again, greeted by the light of day. His first destination was the guild. Without delay, Yukito walked through the doors and presented his report. The staff member at the registration desk listened to his account, eyes widening in alarm, and then hurried off to call a supervisor. The return of a hunter from the 20th floor was rare, but the claim of defeating not one but two bosses alone was staggering. As expected, his story caused a stir. The supervisor asked for an immediate interview to document the incident, but Yukito declined politely. He requested to postpone it, explaining that urgent matters awaited him. Once free from the guild, Yukito ran as fast as his legs would carry him. His figure drew attention on the streets, and people began to whisper. His name was already spreading across the news. He had become the man who cleared 20 floors and defeated two bosses single-handedly, setting a record. For many, it was an unbelievable feat. However, none of the attention mattered to him. He did not fight for recognition, wealth, or glory. His reason was clear and personal. This was for his family. Clutched tightly in his possession was the rare medicine, the elixir that could cure his mother's illness. That was all that mattered. Time passed, and soon Yukito was at the hospital. Beside him stood his younger sister, Nomi, both waiting anxiously as the doctor examined their mother. The moment felt unbearably long, every second heavy with expectation. Finally, the doctor returned with the results. He looked at them, astonishment clear in his eyes, and announced the outcome. Their mother was completely healthy. The room filled with relief and joy. The doctor himself admitted he had never witnessed such an incredible effect. The elixir's potency had surpassed his knowledge of medicine. Nomi threw her arms around their mother, unable to hold back her happiness. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clung tightly. Their mother, voice trembling, reached for Yukito's hand and thanked him with all her heart. She was overwhelmed with gratitude, knowing it was through his strength and perseverance that she could finally recover. Yukito, fighting to steady his emotions, told her that everything he achieved was only possible because of her guidance and care through the years. His words came from the depths of his heart, and the weight of their meaning silenced the room. Nomi, touched deeply, reacted with her usual frankness. She scolded him playfully, saying such words should be spoken at home instead of in front of the doctor. Yukito scratched the back of his head, half embarrassed and half amused, yet he could not deny her point. His sister's tears, however, betrayed how much his sincerity had moved her. She admitted quietly that despite all the years that had passed, her brother still had not learned to look beyond his own nose. The tender moment was suddenly interrupted. A strange stillness swept through the room. Time itself seemed to stop, freezing everything in place. Through the window, unseen eyes observed the Takahashi family. The frame creaked softly as the window shifted open, and a foot crossed into the chamber. A man entered, his expression heavy with regret. His heart ached at what he was about to do, for the family before him was pure and sincere, bound by love. Yet he carried a burden that compelled him to act. He was tall, with striking blonde hair, though his attire was surprisingly simple, almost plain. The walls of the hospital did little to ease his grief, for he knew what his actions would mean. In his thoughts, he repeated the words he had heard many times from doctors. They always said they had done their best, but sometimes the best was not enough. Soon, the Takahashi family would face a tragedy explained away as nothing more than a heart attack. That was the cover the world would accept. With a clenched fist, the blonde intruder struck toward Nomi. His movement was swift and precise, aimed to end her life instantly. Yet before the blow could land, Yukito moved. He intercepted the attack, blocking it with sheer willpower and strength. The attacker froze in shock. He had not expected resistance, let alone from Yukito. The young man glared at him, demanding to know his intent, yet the blonde offered no reply. His surprise lay not in being questioned but in something far greater. He had not believed it possible for Yukito to move at all in this suspended world. Realization struck Yukito at that moment. He recognized the intruder. The man before him was none other than Uyama Cosmolite, the strongest adventurer alive, ranked number 1, revered by many as the savior of humanity. His presence was unmistakable, confirmed further when he revealed a unique badge that only a true hero could possess. Confusion tore at Yukito's mind. Why would a hero, celebrated and admired, seek to harm his family? His question lingered unspoken, yet Uyama interrupted with his own demand. He wanted to know how Yukito was capable of movement within nothingness. Such an ability belonged only to those who had died once before. His conclusion was sharp and unyielding. The only explanation was that Yukito had been reborn. The words rang heavy in the room. If Uyama was so certain of this truth, it meant only one thing. He too had walked the path of rebirth. Yukito stood in the hospital room, still on edge after blocking the sudden strike aimed at Nomi. The presence of Uyama Cosmolite, the top-ranked adventurer and supposed hero of the world, made the situation feel unreal. Uyama's calm expression contrasted sharply with the hostility of his actions. He looked at Yukito as if weighing how much he should reveal. Since Yukito already knew enough to connect fragments of the truth, Uyama decided to explain. He stated that he had not come here for personal gain or senseless violence. His presence was tied to the survival of the world. According to him, Nomi was a danger, not because of who she was now, but because of what her future actions would cause. She would one day marry a figure of great importance, and their eventual divorce would plunge that man into despair. That despair would lead to catastrophic consequences, ultimately bringing about the downfall of the world. Because of this, Uyama had arrived to eliminate Nomi before that future could unfold. The word struck Yukito like a thunderclap. He demanded to know what Uyama meant by tying his sister to the end of the world. The reasoning seemed absurd. Nomi was just his sister, an ordinary girl who had endured hardship only because of their mother's illness. To suggest that her existence carried such weight was something he could not accept. Uyama smiled faintly, expecting Yukito to understand and accept the logic. To him, the sacrifice of one life for the survival of all was not cruelty, but necessity. He presented it as a reasonable exchange, yet the effect was the opposite. Yukito felt his blood boil at the idea. His voice shook as he rejected the claim. This timeline was not the same as the one Uyama described. Here, their mother had already been cured. Nomi no longer carried the burden of hospital bills that once forced her to work nights. Without that desperate path, she would never cross paths with the man Uyama spoke of. The conditions that once doomed her future no longer existed. Killing Nomi here was meaningless. Uyama found the argument curious but unconvincing. He insisted that no theory could outweigh certainty. He would not risk the end of the world on possibilities. The only choice, as far as he was concerned, was to ensure Nomi's removal. Yukito's hands clenched tightly at his sides. He declared that Uyama would not touch his sister, no matter what reasoning he offered. Though Uyama admitted he did not desire to kill, he explained that his role as a hero sometimes demanded actions others would despise. He claimed that his mission had never been about bloodshed but about protecting the greater good. One sacrifice to guarantee peace seemed to him an honorable exchange. However, Yukito's determination only hardened. He swore that he would protect Nomi, even if it meant opposing the strongest adventurer alive. For a brief moment, Uyama hesitated. He acknowledged Yukito's will but still did not retreat. Instead, an idea occurred to him. Rather than forcing the outcome immediately, he would allow Yukito the chance to prove himself. He proposed a duel, framing it as a test of potential. If Yukito could endure against him for a short period, perhaps his existence as an awakened individual carried meaning worth preserving. Yukito was baffled. He could not understand why the hero would choose to risk even that much. Yet Uyama's tone carried authority. He looked down on Yukito, speaking as if the outcome had already been decided. Yukito felt the sting of humiliation, but it was expected from a man who stood at the top. Still, the arrogance was difficult to endure. A translucent information window appeared before Yukito's eyes, displaying Uyama's attributes. The numbers were staggering, far beyond anything Yukito could comprehend. Shock washed over him. How could a man possess such unthinkable power? As he stared at the figures, Uyama stepped closer. His voice was calm but merciless. Without power, he said, Yukito could not protect anyone. Whether it was the world or the people he cherished, weakness always ended the same way. This truth, Uyama explained, was one that every reborn individual came to accept sooner or later. Now Yukito faced a choice. Either Uyama killed Nomi immediately, or Yukito accepted the duel. He briefly considered running away with his family using the bracelet of changeability, but even that had limits. He could not remain at his sister's side every hour of the day. Escaping now would only delay the inevitable. Finally, Yukito clenched his fists and accepted the challenge. He knew he could not win, but he also knew he could not abandon his sister. Uyama nodded as if this decision was only natural. He reassured Yukito that the duel would not be about mercilessly beating him. The rules were simple. Yukito had to last 10 minutes while wielding his ability of nothingness. If he endured, he would win. The condition seemed impossible, yet Yukito felt no fear. His only concern was protecting Nomi. He asked if the battle would begin here, but Uyama shook his head. Destroying a hospital full of innocent people was not acceptable. He leapt toward the window, breaking it open with effortless grace, and invited Yukito to follow. Yukito glanced back at Nomi, who stood frozen in fear, still unable to process the scale of the confrontation. He promised silently that he would protect her no matter what. Then he turned back to Uyama, who waited outside like a figure of destiny. With determination burning in his chest, Yukito jumped after him. A few minutes later, Yukito and Uyama arrived at the park near the hospital. The open space, surrounded by trees and quiet streets, provided the perfect ground for the duel. Yukito stood firm, knowing that facing the strongest adventurer alive would not be simple. He silently hoped Uyama would not hold back too much, for a half-hearted fight would serve no purpose. Uyama looked at him with a smile, seemingly pleased with Yukito's resolve. He admired the kind of determination that refused to bow in the face of overwhelming power. With a snap of his fingers, glowing runes materialized in the air around him. Each rune shimmered with the essence of a different element, the building blocks of the world itself. Without hesitation, the runes burst into action. Flames surged, torrents of water lashed forward, jagged stone pillars erupted from the ground, and currents of wind cut across the field. Yukito's eyes widened at the speed and ferocity of the assault. He had expected Uyama to test him first, yet the hero wasted no time in unleashing devastating force. Uyama's smile deepened. He declared that this was only the beginning. With another gesture, he summoned two doppelgangers, perfect replicas of himself. They materialized with seamless precision, their movements mirroring the original. Yukito's heart sank at the sight. The hero not only commanded the elements but could also multiply his presence. For a man already regarded as untouchable, this ability made him even more terrifying. Refusing to falter, Yukito opened his inventory and retrieved two replacement dolls. Activating them, he directed each toward one of the clones. Now each opponent had a target, creating the illusion of balance. When the first clash erupted, Yukito quickly realized the disparity. His puppets were fragile, barely holding against a single strike before crumbling apart. The doppelgangers dismissed them with ease, their attacks merciless. Uyama's expression hardened slightly. He hoped Yukito understood that survival could not be achieved through defense alone. Yukito did understand, though. He tightened his grip on the Staff of Inconsequence, the weapon that had once turned the tide for him. Familiar runic patterns began forming around him as he prepared to cast his strongest spell. Every heartbeat mattered. Yukito aimed the staff at Uyama, channeling energy until a blazing meteorite tore through the night sky. Its fiery mass illuminated the park, descending toward the hero with destructive promise. The explosion that followed was immense, consuming the area in flames and debris. Yukito exhaled sharply, hoping it would at least buy him precious time. Through the smoke, Uyama's voice rang out, unshaken. He remarked that he understood now. Yukito's gift from rebirth was luck. Where Uyama commanded nothingness, Yukito bent probability to his favor. Uyama avoided the impact by substituting one of his doppelgangers, allowing the clone to take the devastating strike in his place. Yukito frowned. He admitted Uyama could see through him too easily. Uyama replied that it was only a matter of deduction, given Yukito's unusual feats. The thought of achieving everything through luck seemed absurd to Uyama, yet he acknowledged that luck was no less real than strength or intelligence. Even so, depending solely on it was reckless and dangerous. With renewed determination, Uyama conjured more runes. This time, elemental beings emerged from their glow. Streams of water shaped into humanoid forms, flames danced into monstrous figures, and emerald light birthed creatures of nature. The ground itself trembled as earth elementals joined the ranks. The hero raised his hand, commanding them with ease, determined to prove that relying on chance was folly. Yukito silently agreed that living by luck alone was foolish. However, as he observed Uyama's displayed attributes, he noticed something strange. The hero's luck value was abnormally low, as if the world itself compensated for his overwhelming strength by stripping fortune away from him. Yukito pushed aside hesitation. He could not afford to think about pride or embarrassment now. Protecting his family demanded everything he had. Memories of his mother's smile and Nomi's laughter steadied his heart. They had given him everything when he had nothing, and now it was his turn to give back. He could not retreat, not even for an instant. Uyama pointed toward him and asked if he was ready. Without waiting for an answer, the elementals surged forward, unleashing fire, water, wind, and earth in unison. Their combined assault painted a picture of inevitable defeat. Uyama reminded him that the world was cruel and unfair, and that accepting this truth was part of growing stronger. As the fire elemental advanced and the water construct prepared to strike, Yukito calmly opened his inventory. His plan was bold, almost reckless, yet perfectly suited to his gift. He selected the variability bracelet, an item he had relied on before. In an instant, the bracelet materialized around his wrist, glowing faintly. The system confirmed its connection, and activation succeeded despite Yukito's lack of intelligence and class affinity. Luck tilted the outcome in his favor once again. He smirked faintly, knowing that against Uyama, sheer strength would never be enough. His only advantage lay in the unpredictable. As the magic surged toward him, Yukito vanished from Uyama's sight. The bracelet allowed him to slip beyond normal perception, leaving the elementals striking only air. Somewhere in the center of the city, hidden behind the veil of nothingness that shielded the place from outside eyes, Yukito materialized precisely where he intended. His timing and positioning were deliberate, chosen to give him an advantage in the confrontation ahead. Uyama stood across from him, surprised by the sudden appearance of a variability bracelet. Such a tool would normally be invaluable in battle, yet Uyama found little need for it, as he relied heavily on his natural magic of flight. Yukito leapt down from the roof of a car, landing smoothly on the ground. He declared his intention to continue their fight here rather than elsewhere, since Uyama had challenged him so directly. In turn, Yukito wished to test Uyama's strength himself. If Uyama truly considered himself a hero, then he should not drag innocent bystanders into their conflict. The blond man who observed the exchange found the notion intriguing. Indeed, Uyama considered himself a hero. His purpose was to protect people, not to bring unnecessary destruction. To prove this, he avoided drawing upon his wide-scale magic, which would have endangered the surroundings. He had recalled his elementals and dismissed the use of his sword as well. None of that would be necessary against Yukito. Heroes could overcome cunning adversaries without resorting to reckless force. Yukito placed his sword into his inventory, unwilling to rely on it for the moment. His attention rested entirely on Uyama, eager to see how the so-called hero would respond to the trial before him. Uyama equipped only a shield, convinced that it alone was sufficient. Raising it before him, he prepared to continue the battle. The sight stirred a sense of nostalgia in the blond man, who recalled that in his previous life Uyama had faced many enemies who endangered civilians, using them as shields to mask their true weakness. Uyama then summoned magical spears. These weapons possessed a peculiar quality, weaving through the air to relentlessly track their target, carefully avoiding obstacles in their pursuit. Yukito darted sharply into an alley to create space, hoping to shake them off. Despite his swift movements, one of the spears closed in, streaking toward him with deadly accuracy. At the final moment, Yukito lifted his shield and deflected the attack. The projectile ricocheted off the shield, then drilled into the side of a nearby building. The impact proved catastrophic. The spear pierced not only the concrete foundation of the wall but also ruptured gas pipes concealed within. The faint hiss of escaping pressure filled the air, a dangerous reminder of how easily the fight could spiral into chaos. Uyama, unaffected, began speaking of his past battles once more. He described how often he had fought against humans masquerading as monsters or those who deliberately sowed lawlessness throughout the city. Such adversaries had grown more numerous with each passing year. Seizing the moment, Yukito responded, trying to ensnare Uyama in dialogue. He revealed fragments of his own history, explaining that he had spent most of his time in dungeons, living a harsh existence where survival left little room for sentiment. For him, the city was nothing more than a place to gather supplies. His memories of his past life were hazy and fragmented, as though time itself had worn them down. Uyama's expression darkened as he listened. He had hoped to share the comfort of nostalgia with someone who might understand what it meant to carry experiences from another lifetime. Yet Yukito made it clear he had no desire to reopen those old scars. To Yukito, his previous existence was nothing but that of a worm crawling desperately across the ground, striving to survive without dignity. Uyama tried to encourage him, telling him to embrace the chance of a new life. Without hesitation, Uyama lashed out with a swift kick. The strike caught Yukito off guard, sending him rolling across the ground and nearly knocking him from beneath the frame of a parked car. Yukito pulled himself upright, remarking that he had always been more comfortable within confined, narrow spaces. The declaration enraged Uyama. The notion that he might be fighting a coward infuriated him. Yukito, however, paid no attention to the insult. Instead, he grabbed a skateboard that had been abandoned nearby, using it to increase his speed as he attempted to reposition himself. Uyama shouted after him, declaring that no matter what Yukito believed, fleeing would not save him. The hero was beginning to tire of Yukito's evasive tactics. For Uyama, battles were meant to prove worth and honor, not to indulge the games of an opponent who ran endlessly. If Yukito could not stand his ground, then he was not worthy of recognition. As Uyama pressed forward, Yukito suddenly found his path blocked. An obstacle loomed before him, leaving him cornered in what appeared to be a dead end. Yukito skidded off the skateboard and looked around quickly. Uyama closed the distance, preparing to unleash his strongest attack. From the hero's perspective, the fight had already reached its conclusion. If this was the extent of Yukito's strength, then victory was already his. Yet Yukito's gaze fell on a lamppost standing to his left. A plan formed instantly in his mind. Rather than retreat, he dashed toward the concrete base of the post. With precision, he pivoted and drove his foot powerfully against it. The impact cracked the foundation, and the structure wavered. Uyama halted his advance, confused at what Yukito was attempting. In another instant, the lamppost groaned and began to topple, its heavy frame leaning downward. Yukito steadied himself, his lips curling into a subtle smile. The falling post would change the rhythm of the fight, and for him, that was the perfect moment to seize control. Uyama remained watchful, but uncertainty flickered across his features. He realized too late that Yukito had no intention of fighting by traditional means. For Yukito, the environment itself was a weapon, and the battle had only just begun. The moment of decision had arrived, and Uyama acted with urgency. A massive pillar collapsed in his direction, its shadow stretching across the pavement. For the first time in their battle, confusion flickered across Uyama's face, and even a trace of fear surfaced. While he braced himself, another danger emerged from behind. A car sped directly toward him. In an instant, Uyama grasped Yukito's strategy. He realized he had been cornered. Yukito observed the unfolding scene with satisfaction, clapping his hands lightly as though he were applauding a carefully staged performance. Every movement had been accounted for, and he knew Uyama had no alternative response. The trap had been laid to ensure no innocent life would be harmed during the clash. Forced into action, Uyama caught the falling pillar with great effort and lowered it to the ground. He remarked that such an outcome was predictable, though his voice betrayed a hint of strain. Yukito smiled as Uyama admitted that he had been surprised despite his claim. The young man countered that if the situation had truly been obvious, then Uyama must protect people regardless of cost. His remark left Uyama silent, his expression tight with unease. In that moment, severed power lines sparked violently, their energy crackling through the ruined pillar. Golden flashes of electricity rippled across its surface, threatening a disaster that could harm countless bystanders. There was no time to deliberate. A deafening explosion erupted behind Uyama, shaking the ground. He turned swiftly, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Flames surged outward, devouring everything in their path. Heat radiated through the air, suffocating and relentless. At last, Uyama called forth his undines, commanding them to extinguish the fire before it spread further. The water spirits answered, rushing to combat the blaze with torrents of liquid force. Yukito remained calm, almost entertained by the chaos. Watching Uyama's desperation, he commented that even more water was needed. The fire raged down the street, consuming nearby trees. The trunks collapsed under the weight of the flames, crushing vehicles along the roadway. Asphalt cracked beneath the intense heat until finally the ground split apart, forming a massive chasm in the center of the highway. The abyss swallowed cars and debris indiscriminately, creating scenes of devastation. Uyama's composure faltered. Overcome with frustration, he screamed in disbelief. He had never expected the battle to unravel into such widespread destruction. Desperate, he directed Scylla and Gnome to assist. The magical beings obeyed at once. Gnome leapt forward to rescue a young girl trapped in a car on the edge of the crevice, pulling her free moments before the vehicle plunged downward. Scylla, wielding her power of wind, lifted another car from the abyss and set it safely aside. Together they retrieved victims and salvaged belongings from the heart of the disaster. Yukito approached from behind, his expression calm and confident. He reminded Uyama that he was still present, asking if the adventurer had already forgotten about him in the midst of the chaos. Uyama, consumed by his task, shouted that he had no time to deal with Yukito's games. He considered himself untouchable, certain the young man lacked the strength to inflict serious harm. Yukito quietly opened his system window, preparing his next move. He reasoned that although direct damage might not succeed, he could still manipulate circumstances to his advantage. Uyama raised his shield, determined to withstand whatever came, but he underestimated Yukito's cunning. With sudden force, Yukito struck, sending Uyama stumbling backward. The unexpected blow shattered his balance, and the once imposing adventurer toppled helplessly into the open sewer below. The red cloak that had once symbolized authority fluttered briefly before being stained by filth. Uyama's fall was as humiliating as it was literal, plunging him into the foul water. Yukito remarked that irony had played its part, as the greatest adventurer now floundered in filth. The look on Uyama's face captured both horror and despair, his pride crushed beneath the weight of humiliation. The brown water rose around him until he was submerged to the shoulders. Yukito, refusing to relent, raised his flower-adorned wand and pointed it at Uyama. He declared the fight unfinished. Pressured beyond endurance, Uyama raised his hands in surrender. He admitted defeat and acknowledged Yukito's victory. In the aftermath, the magical creatures continued their efforts until the fire was extinguished and the remaining victims rescued. Exhausted and drenched in dirty water, Uyama sat slumped on the back of a truck. Water dripped from his armor in steady streams. He confessed that his own shortcomings often led him into disgraceful circumstances such as these. He admitted he had foreseen trouble arising from their duel, though he had not anticipated such a crushing and comprehensive defeat. For the first time in years, he shed his arrogance. The admission of defeat triggered memories for Yukito. Uyama's words reminded him of a past accident, one that had scarred him deeply. A terrifying vision filled his mind. The explosive destruction of a high-rise building, its windows shattering outward with force. The chaos left behind small remnants, including a bouquet of flowers and a takeout package scattered across the pavement. Yukito remembered himself kneeling, his hands pressed together in prayer, his eyes closed tightly. The memory was painful yet grounding. It was these very experiences that allowed Yukito to surpass Uyama during their confrontation. Drawing strength from loss, he had proven that the mistakes of the past need not be repeated. He asked Uyama whether he had succeeded in demonstrating that determination. Uyama clapped his hands in acknowledgement, admitting that Yukito had achieved his aim. Uyama leapt from the truck with surprising energy despite his defeat. As he walked away, he remarked that Yukito would be allowed to remain by her side a while longer. The ambiguous statement left Yukito dissatisfied, though he remained silent. Without turning back, Uyama added that soon the veil of oblivion would descend, and Yukito would bear the responsibility of managing the consequences of their clash. His words hinted at the massive abyss still carved into the highway, a scar left behind by their battle. With a final wave, Uyama reminded Yukito that he needed to return to the hospital. He insisted that Yukito take responsibility for resolving the Cursebone disaster that awaited. Yukito could not comprehend what his new acquaintance was trying to say. The expression on his face revealed only confusion, and even Uyama, the blonde adventurer speaking to him, looked taken aback by it. He could not believe that Yukito did not realize the curse was the cause of the tragedy that had unfolded at the hospital. With disbelief heavy in his voice, Uyama asked how Yukito could be unaware of it, especially since he had supposedly come from the future. Yukito responded honestly, admitting it was the first time he had ever heard of such a thing. His answer caused Uyama to smile strangely, almost as if he believed Yukito was joking with him. However, the adventurer quickly dismissed the idea of humor, stating that it was nothing to laugh about. Yukito's serious expression confirmed his sincerity. Folding his arms across his chest, he looked directly at Uyama, trying to understand the meaning of these warnings. Uyama's astonishment grew as he pressed the issue further. How could Yukito not recall the disasters? The fires, the crumbled roads, the devastation that everyone else knew of? At last, Yukito revealed the truth. He had spent nearly his entire past life inside dungeons, farming slimes for 10 long years. Because of that, he had missed the events Uyama was referencing. The adventurer finally realized that Yukito's lack of memory was not an act, but a genuine gap in his knowledge. Accepting that fact, Uyama reasoned that Yukito could not possibly know how to resist the curse. Yukito himself spread his hands wide in defeat, admitting his ignorance. The realization left Uyama troubled, and he lowered his gaze to the ground, staring silently at his shoes while the weight of the problem settled on his shoulders. After a pause, Uyama admitted there was no longer time to explain everything. The sky's color warned him that oblivion would soon fall. He instructed Yukito to go to the morgue in the hospital's basement, insisting that he would understand everything once he arrived there. Irritation flashed across Yukito's face as he questioned why he should follow such cryptic orders. Despite his frustration, Uyama did not argue. He only stated that Yukito could try to figure things out on his own, but there was a real possibility he would fail. As he walked away, he warned that if nothing was done, many lives could be lost. His words struck Yukito with unease, but before he could ask anything further, Cosmolight carried Uyama into the air, disappearing into the sky. Yukito admitted to himself that he did not fully understand what was happening, yet he decided it would be best to return to the hospital. He touched the bracelet of changeability, determined to rejoin his mother and sister as quickly as possible. He arrived in time, for the void around them soon vanished, and ordinary people resumed walking on the streets as if nothing had happened. None of them could have guessed that only moments earlier, powerful beings had been fighting in the same place. Back inside the hospital, Yukito found that no one had even noticed his absence. The doctor concluded the consultation and advised his mother to continue with regular checkups. Yukito promised to follow that advice, and his mother, relieved by the positive results, expressed her gratitude. He smiled quietly, satisfied that he had managed to secure the elixir and save her life. Still, the words of Uyama lingered in his mind. He had warned that there was no time to explain and admitted that even he did not completely understand what would happen. That uncertainty compelled Yukito to verify the truth himself. As he reached for the door handle, he resolved that they could not remain in the hospital. He needed to get his mother and sister out as soon as possible. In the hallway, his younger sister Numi confessed that she felt nervous and wanted to eat. Their mother suggested stopping by a cafe to celebrate her recovery, but Yukito gently refused, insisting he would cook dinner for them instead. Both women were surprised, as it was unusual for him to take charge of cooking. He smiled, assuring them it was his way of celebrating, though he requested that they buy the ingredients on their way home without him. His mother agreed warmly, while Numi also accepted. As they discussed the meal and walked out of the hospital together, Yukito quietly waited until he was sure they had left the grounds safely. Only then did he turn his attention to the morgue. Before heading there, he entered the men's restroom and locked himself inside a cubicle. From within his bag, he pulled out a white hooded cloak, a magical prize from his battle against the bandit Co. Wearing it concealed him from lesser creatures, and although he had never imagined needing it for this kind of mission, he decided it was the safest option. A patient using the restroom saw the cubicle door move on its own and muttered about ghosts, unaware of Yukito slipping out unseen. Moving swiftly, Yukito reached the elevator at the far end of the corridor and waited as it descended. His thoughts churned restlessly as he wondered why he had never heard of the so-called curse of disaster. Uyama had promised that the morgue would reveal the truth. When the elevator finally arrived at the basement, Yukito stepped into a long corridor lined with doors. Silence pressed heavily around him, so absolute it unsettled him. He wondered if the catastrophe Uyama had spoken of would begin here. Activating his system radar, he confirmed there was no one alive on this floor, which at least allowed him to investigate freely. Yukito studied the signs on the doors, moving cautiously until he finally reached the morgue. Pushing the door open, he stepped into darkness. As his eyes adjusted, the tiled room came into view. Beds were arranged in rows, each with a body covered in white cloth. For a fleeting moment, Yukito thought grimly that one day he might lie among them. He walked slowly through the room, gazing at the covered corpses and waiting for some revelation. At the far end, he turned and looked back over them all, but no answer came. With a sigh, he pulled down his hood and decided to wait a little longer. Eventually, impatience set in, and he began to think Uyama might have deceived him. Opening his system window, he froze in shock. A red warning message flashed before his eyes, and red could mean only one thing: danger. Strange noises echoed through the room. A crimson glow spread from beneath the sheets that covered the bodies. One corpse shifted violently, and the cloth fell away to reveal a twisted face locked in a convulsion. Then, impossibly, the dead woman sat up. One by one, more bodies stirred. In less than a minute, a dozen corpses had risen, shambling forward as zombies. The growls of the living dead echoed through the morgue, a sound that crossed every boundary of horror. At that moment, Yukito finally agreed with Uyama. The adventurer had been right. This place held the clue he had promised. Holding his sword firmly in front of him, Yukito braced himself to face the danger with as much composure as he could muster. With each step the zombies took, the unbearable stench of rotting flesh thickened the air, forcing him to endure the nauseating atmosphere. He reflected briefly that the strongest seekers usually face the undead from positions of safety, striking from above or behind barriers. These creatures were not ordinary corpses, though. They foamed at the mouth, their growls harsh and violent, like rabid animals ready to tear him apart. The first to reach him was a woman with long, disheveled hair. In that instant, Yukito realized this was no virus at work. It was something darker. One clean swing of his sword severed her head, sending it rolling across the floor. Yukito concluded that the transformation had been caused by a curse rather than a natural infection. More undead closed in, and memories stirred in his mind. He recalled the grim truth. If an adventurer was cursed before death and left unburied for too long, the corpse would inevitably turn into a zombie. Another monster lunged at him, but his blade struck hard, slicing the body in two from head to torso. Before he could regain his balance, a third zombie rushed from the side. Reacting with lightning speed, Yukito drove his foot into its stomach, kicking the undead across the room. His eyes flickered with realization that the curse might be able to spread from one corpse to another. In his previous life, he remembered how the souls of the dead had been calmed through the power of holiness. Yet in this world, such practices had not been rediscovered. He found some small comfort in knowing the curse did not spread to the living unless a zombie's bite inflicted the mark. Still, the threat was real and immediate. Grabbing a nearby metal bed, Yukito hurled it at the next oncoming monster, crushing it beneath the weight. Every movement demanded caution. He destroyed the creatures methodically, ensuring none surrounded him. His blade flashed again, cleaving through another skull, while the sound of cracking bones echoed in the chamber. Using the beds as improvised shields, he pushed them between himself and the snarling horde, limiting their chances to bite him. One zombie flew back against the wall after he used a bed as a battering ram. Yet more poured in, their numbers relentless. Straining against them, Yukito dragged several beds into position, aligning them into a makeshift barricade. For a brief moment, it reduced the pressure, but the monsters pressed forward again, hungering for him. Through the chaos, he noticed a talisman dangling from one zombie's neck. Recognition struck him, it had belonged to a renowned adventurer in life. The thought twisted his chest with grief. For such a figure to degrade into a mindless monster after death was a tragedy beyond words. The door behind him suddenly rattled, the handle turning. Yukito froze as the door burst open and two more figures stumbled inside. Both collapsed upon entry, their balance failing them. Yet when they rose, he realized with dread that more undead had entered the fight. Surrounded now, Yukito steeled his resolve. Encouraging himself, he acted quickly. His blade cut through the neck of one zombie in a single stroke. He turned toward the second, ready to finish it as well, when his system radar interrupted him. The target glowed green, marked as neutral. Confusion gripped him, and before he struck, the woman raised her head and cried for help. Terror filled her eyes. Yukito froze, stunned to realize this woman was alive. He reasoned she must have been an employee of the morgue, trapped in the wrong place at the wrong time. The thought crossed his mind that no matter the effort, a true zombie could never be restored to humanity. Yet if the infection was recent, there might still be hope. He crouched at her side, recognizing bitterly that he lacked the proper tools for treatment. Worse, his barricade was already failing against the continued assault. The choice weighed heavily on him. Allowing her to perish might have been the logical option, but his heart refused it. A true hero could not abandon someone in need. Opening the system window, Yukito activated the bracelet of change. The artifact flared to life, and the system announced its use. To create the necessary cure, he needed alchemical tools and the blood of the infected person. The recipe for the elixir surfaced in his memory, and though it felt like an impossible task, he could not turn away. He gently took the woman's hand and drew a small cut on her finger with his sword. A drop of blood fell onto the cold blade, and he quickly collected it into a flask. Now all the components for the potion were gathered. Sitting on the floor, Yukito mixed them carefully, each motion precise despite the chaos surrounding him. As he completed the final step, anxiety gripped him. He feared he had done something wrong. The system then flashed a message, confirming the attempt to create the sacred elixir of purification. Yet the warnings were severe. His alchemy level was too low, leaving only a 25% chance of success. Without advanced synthesis, the probability rose to 70%. His magical reserves were also lacking. Even so, fortune favored him. Against all odds, the elixir succeeded. Yukito exhaled in relief. He urged the woman to hold on and carefully poured the potion into her mouth. At once, her body glowed with holy light. Moments later, the radiance faded, and she slumped unconscious but alive. Helping her sit upright, Yukito offered quiet gratitude that she had been saved. Yet he knew there was no more time. Retrieving his sword, he turned back toward the threat. His barricade was no longer under pressure. Curious, he peered through the crack. The silence was eerie. The zombies had stopped attacking. Instead, they were gathering around a pool of thick, black substance seeping across the floor. Every undead in the room moved toward it, as if drawn by an irresistible command. Their skin darkened, their eyes and gaping mouths glowing an unnatural green. The force consuming them was terrifyingly powerful. One by one, the zombies merged into a single abomination. Tentacles sprouted across its body, its mouth filled with jagged teeth, and a guttural roar burst forth. The sheer pressure of its cry sent Yukito's makeshift barricade flying across the room. Yukito did not know the answer to what this abomination was or how it appeared. The thought lingered that it might be the work of the curse that haunted him. During the time he had been away preparing potions, it seemed the curse had gathered strength and taken form. Perhaps this was the cost he had to bear for helping those in despair. He wondered if Uyama Cosmolite would laugh at him if he ever learned of this. Despite that possibility, Yukito did not regret his choice. He had saved the woman, and now he would face the consequence. A giant zombie loomed before him, its twisted body sprouting writhing tentacles. One of them lashed toward him, seeking to drag him into its clutches. Yukito's reflexes saved him as he darted aside, closing the distance in the same motion. His sword flashed and a monstrous head toppled to the ground. To kill a zombie, decapitation was the only way. Yet before he could take a breath, another tentacle swept toward him. He ducked, striking again. The creature had multiple heads, each one snarling with mindless hunger. He severed them one after another, his blade never resting. Still, the task remained incomplete, for as long as a single head endured, the monster would not perish. Two more tentacles lunged simultaneously. Yukito spun, slicing them cleanly apart. Before the severed limbs even struck the floor, he had vanished from his position, his speed carrying him past the beast. His sword carved through more necks in a blur. It was the same tactic he had honed in his previous life, built on speed and precision. The goal was simple: remove every head. Once none remained, the creature would be no more. With a final stroke, he cut down the last of them and allowed himself a moment's hope. Perhaps now it is over. The corpse collapsed with a heavy thud. Yukito waited for it to crumble into lifeless flesh. Instead, horror seized him. Black energy swirled around the carcass, binding it together. The severed head reformed, and glowing green eyes snapped open once more. Yukito's breath caught. It was regenerating. The monster seized nearby corpses with its tentacles, shoving them into its cavernous mouth. Limbs dangled grotesquely from between its teeth as it chewed. In moments, 3 new heads sprouted from its body. The realization struck hard. It was feeding on the dead to restore itself. Any other zombie would have withered away, yet this one grew stronger. The truth was unavoidable. He had to sever the final head before the others regenerated. However, his combat style was built for direct confrontation. He lacked ranged abilities, which would have been invaluable here. A fleeting thought reminded him of his magic staff, but using it recklessly would destroy the hospital. He considered waiting for another adventurer, perhaps even that arrogant blonde he despised, but the thought only made him grit his teeth. There was no time for help. He had to do this alone. Meanwhile, the abomination continued consuming corpses, each swallowed body giving birth to another snarling head. Its form warped with every addition, threatening to become something unstoppable. A guttural roar filled the room as tentacles whipped toward him again. He barely evaded, the strike smashing into the wall behind him. Plaster crumbled from the ceiling, warning that the building itself might collapse. Yukito pressed forward, fully aware that delay was fatal. If the monster devoured enough of its kind, it would grow beyond control. He knew this, yet struggled with how to fight it. What he needed was a method to annihilate all of it at once without tearing the hospital apart. Such a weapon was not in his arsenal. Frustration gnawed at him until a spark of inspiration lit his thoughts. His gaze fell on an alchemical bowl in the corner. Another set of tentacles lashed out, forcing him to react. He cut them down in 2 swift arcs, then darted toward the alchemical kit. He slid behind a metal bed, narrowly avoiding another crushing blow. Ideas swirled rapidly. If he lacked the right weapon, then he would create one. His mind, sharpened by crisis, began seeking solutions. His eyes landed on the metal frame of the table. With one precise slash, he cut free a length of pipe. Even ordinary items could be repurposed as tools of survival. The system acknowledged the action, recording 4 metal legs obtained. A tentacle immediately smashed into his shelter, splintering the frame. Yukito only grinned. He seized a steel plate, raising it as a makeshift shield. Again, the system registered the artifact. The shield proved light yet durable, intercepting 3 consecutive strikes as the monster pressed forward. Behind its cover, Yukito's hands flew across the alchemy book. His eyes scanned for something useful until they caught on a recipe. Black powder. It required potassium nitrate, sulfur, and charcoal. A surge of disappointment flickered. Such ingredients were not readily available in a morgue. His bracelet could have allowed him to teleport and retrieve what he needed, but a glance revealed its energy was depleted. He had pushed it too hard throughout the day. For a brief instant, despair threatened to take hold, but another possibility emerged. If he could not obtain the ingredients, then perhaps he could create them. Alchemy was not limited to potions. With the right combination of resources and ingenuity, he might synthesize what he required. It would be dangerous, yet no more so than allowing the monster to continue growing. The abomination bellowed, its swollen mass swelling with fresh heads. Tentacles tore through walls and floors indiscriminately. Dust rained down, and the entire hospital shuddered. Yukito steadied himself, determination sharpening his resolve. His blade had proven insufficient against this regenerating monstrosity. His magic staff risked obliterating everything around him. The only option left was alchemy, the art of creation itself. If he succeeded, he might craft a weapon capable of turning the tide. If he failed, both he and the hospital would be consumed. He braced his shield and prepared his next move. Every second counted. The monster advanced, eager to swallow more corpses. Its hunger was endless, its form ever mutating. Yet Yukito refused to retreat. He had faced death before, and he would face it again. His curse had brought this trial before him, but he would not yield to despair. He would forge the weapon he needed, here and now, from nothing but scraps and his own determination. Yukito's sharp eyes fell upon a piece of cedar wood lying forgotten in the corner. It could serve as the first step toward what he needed. Charcoal would be essential, so he wasted no time. He tossed the wood into the alchemical cauldron, hoping for success. The system immediately announced that alchemy was not suited for this purpose, warning that the chances of success were a mere 25%. His current mastery of alchemy was insufficient. Failure seemed almost certain. Despite the grim report, fortune remained on his side. By a stroke of extraordinary luck, the cedar wood was transformed into high-quality charcoal. Relief washed over him, though he knew this was only the beginning. 2 more ingredients were required. Sulfur and potassium nitrate remained, and their absence weighed heavily on his mind. His blade did not rest while he thought, striking against the regenerating zombie monster to keep it at bay. His attacks forced the creature back, momentarily disrupting its balance. Yukito pressed the advantage but understood that sword strikes alone would not end this battle. Another idea struck him. Information was a weapon of its own. He considered what he might recall from the world before his return. Searching his memory for knowledge as if seeking advice from an unseen guide, he suddenly remembered the answer. Sulfur and potassium nitrate could be extracted from ordinary matches. His gaze shifted around the ruined hospital room until it landed on a pot of incense. Incense required flame, and flame required matches. A spark of hope flared within him. The woman he had saved lay unconscious nearby, her strength not yet restored. Yukito knelt beside her and retrieved her purse, reasoning there might be something useful inside. He spilled the contents onto the floor and his eyes immediately caught the small box of matches. Without hesitation, he cast them into the cauldron, urging the system to extract what he required. Once again the system cast doubt upon him, claiming that success was unlikely. Yet his unnatural luck prevailed. Both sulfur and potassium nitrate were obtained successfully, completing the final set of ingredients. Now came the crucial step. Yukito combined them with the charcoal, initiating the creation of black powder. The cauldron roared to life as smoke and sparks burst from its surface. A moment later the result appeared in the system's record. Black powder had been successfully produced. Victory in one stage of the struggle gave him renewed determination. Black powder alone would not be enough. It required a form through which to unleash its destructive potential. The next task was clear. He needed bullets. His mind sharpened as he worked swiftly. The system once again recognized his effort, and soon bullets of high quality emerged from the cauldron. For the first time since the monster's regeneration, Yukito felt that the tide of the battle was shifting in his favor. His thoughts returned to the woman's purse once more. He recalled noticing another item earlier. He retrieved a notebook, flipped it open, and began sketching with rapid strokes. When he lifted his hand, a crude design stared back at him. His eyes brightened as a faint smile touched his lips. He had drawn the shape of a weapon capable of firing the black powder bullets. The zombie had not remained idle. Having recovered its balance, it roared and lunged toward him with renewed ferocity. Tentacles whipped through the air, and broken tiles cracked beneath its weight. Yukito saw the imminent danger yet remained steady. Inwardly he asked himself what weapon could destroy a zombie most effectively. The answer had already been drawn on the notebook page. He tore the sketch free and cast it into the cauldron, activating the next stage of alchemy. The system prompted him to provide material. Yukito selected a sturdy metal leg from a nearby wheelchair, placing it into the cauldron as the primary component. Flames flared upward as the transformation began. Once again the system issued its warning. His lack of metallurgy skills meant the weapon could be poorly crafted. The chance of failure was high. Despite this, he trusted his fortune. Moments later, the cauldron released its creation. Against all odds, a self-firing sawed-off shotgun of excellent quality materialized in his hands. It was far from perfect, yet it gleamed with a promise of deadly efficiency. Yukito held it firmly, understanding its significance. He had not desired to disturb the remains of fallen hunters, yet necessity left no room for hesitation. His survival and the safety of the woman depended on this act. The monster growled, its many heads snapping as it advanced once more. Tentacles lashed with unrelenting speed. Yukito sidestepped, shield still raised, his newly forged weapon clutched in his other hand. Black powder bullets were quickly loaded, each one carrying the potential to end this nightmare. He steadied his breathing. All of his efforts, from the charcoal to the sulfur, had led to this singular moment. Yukito lifted the shotgun, his gaze locking on the central head of the abomination. The creature's glowing eyes widened as if recognizing the threat. Its roar shook the walls, showering dust from the collapsing ceiling. Yet Yukito remained unshaken. His determination was unwavering. This cursed monster had risen again and again, strengthened by the corpses of others. It had consumed, regenerated, and taunted his efforts. Yet now it faced something entirely different. Alchemy and luck had combined to forge a weapon born of desperation and ingenuity. Yukito's finger pressed firmly on the trigger, his thoughts clear. He would kill the undead once more, and this time, he would not allow it to rise again. Yukito steadied his breathing and watched the advancing monster. He had only one chance, and the distance between them was closing rapidly. The system window appeared before him, issuing a sharp warning. His class was not suited for firearms, and the chance of an accidental explosion was 30%. Despite this, he did not falter. His entire life had been shaped by improbable fortune, and once again he trusted in that mysterious power. The shotgun roared, discharging its black powder bullet. The glowing projectile sliced through the air toward the abomination. The monster did not comprehend the danger, its glowing eyes staring at the small golden object as though it were insignificant. The first bullet struck a tentacle, shattering its protective grip around one of the heads. The second hit the mark cleanly, tearing into the central skull. For a brief moment the shell casing clattered across the floor as the head collapsed. The creature's ruined eye immediately tried to regenerate, yet another shot from Yukito blasted the attempt into fragments. He refused to let the monster rise again. He fired without hesitation, unleashing another volley that shattered several of the remaining heads. The monster convulsed, tentacles flailing against the morgue's cracked tiles, but the young man pressed forward. Persistence had always been his strength. Both sawed-off shotguns thundered as he charged, smoke filling the air with every pull of the triggers. The silence of the morgue shattered again and again, echoing with gunfire and the crash of falling debris. Another round tore through a writhing tentacle, sending the severed limb tumbling. Shells scattered across the floor, marking each decisive strike. He pulled the trigger once more, yet the weapon gave no response. The system notified him coldly. The cartridges were empty. At that very moment, the colossal monster collapsed. Its countless heads, now blasted apart, lay strewn across the floor. At last, the cursebone disaster was motionless. Yukito examined the remains with caution. He had seen too many foes regenerate before his eyes, but this time there was no movement. A long breath escaped him as his shoulders eased. Relief struck him with such force that he almost doubted the reality of victory. Then the system message appeared. He had destroyed the cursebone disaster, becoming the first in the world to do so. The system granted him the title of Sacred Slayer. The young man stood still, absorbing the weight of those words. His hands trembled slightly, yet not from fear. It was satisfaction, the recognition that his persistence had achieved something impossible. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he believed this nightmare was truly over. The silence was broken by a soft sound. From the corner of the morgue came muffled sobs. The woman he had rescued earlier was awake, though weak. He had nearly forgotten her in the intensity of the fight. Relief crossed his face when he realized the medicine he had crafted had saved her life. Yet that relief gave way to unease as reality set in. He was drenched in the monster's blood, holding 2 illegal firearms in a hospital morgue where only staff were permitted. His very presence here could not be explained. If he claimed to be the man who had returned from another life, no one would believe him. Moreover, the use of firearms outside dungeons was forbidden. Every law was against him. The burden pressed on his chest, yet he remembered the tool that had helped him reach the basement in the first place. His invisibility cloak still lay folded in his pack. Wrapping it around himself would at least conceal him from immediate discovery. He threw it over his shoulders just as muffled voices reached him from the other side of the morgue door. A commanding voice rang out, instructing subordinates to activate locators and search the area. Whoever was leading the group had already sensed something unusual. Yukito glanced at his discharge bracelet, the artifact of variability that had once been his greatest aid. The red indicator light glowed weakly. Its energy was nearly depleted, leaving his stealth abilities fragile at best. He pressed his palm against the bracelet, whispering a desperate plea for one final use. Yet the artifact remained silent. No shimmer of teleportation enveloped him. His luck had brought him through countless impossible moments, but now it seemed to falter. For the first time, doubt clawed at him. The door burst open. 2 armored knights stormed inside with spears poised, followed by 4 more who carried a large platform upon their shoulders. Atop the platform sat a girl dressed in white with long gray hair, lazily yawning as though the scene before her bored her. Yukito immediately recognized them. Clergymen had arrived. The lead knight stepped forward, pointing his weapon directly into the morgue's interior. His voice was sharp as he declared the presence of a suspicious individual to their mistress. Without raising her eyes from the glowing screen of her phone, the gray-haired girl responded with little interest, asking if the target was an enemy of God. The knight admitted uncertainty, though suspicion was strong. With a sigh filled with indifference, the girl finally looked up. This was Naomi, the church's representative. She handed her phone to her subordinate Reed, instructing him to continue her game while she addressed the situation. With visible reluctance, she rose from the cushioned seat and stepped lightly onto the cracked floor. Naomi folded her hands together, uttering a prayer that mingled mockery with ritual. She invoked the kingdom of heaven, demanding trophies, loot, and fortune, her tone laced with irritation at imagined donors. The prayer ended with an impatient sigh. She walked forward, passing her armored escorts without hesitation. Yukito remained unmoving. His cloak shielded him for the moment, yet he knew her gaze would eventually pierce through it. Naomi was smaller in stature than her followers, yet her presence was undeniable. She stopped before him, tilted her head back, and looked directly at where he stood concealed. Her voice was calm as she asked a single question. She wanted to know if he was an enemy of God.